Chapter 1580. Reeks. In a daze, he seemed to remember a world where one could never help an old lady fall to the ground. It was best not to even get close to her. Who would have thought that in this Elysium, he would be able to get money after knocking down an old lady? Compared to that, this world was indeed better. Not only that, the onlookers were also concerned. "Child, are you all right? That auntie was not careful when she walked. Look at how she knocked someone's child. Sigh, I have not seen such a small child for many years. How pitiful." Not only were the spectators not cold, but they were also very warm. It was as if they could melt a person. Egshing felt guilty and quickly confessed, "It wasn't her who knocked me, it was me who knocked her." The crowd liked him even more. What a good child, speaking up for others even after being knocked down. That's right. Come, child, go buy some pancakes." He was soon drowned in the bodhi seeds. I don't want anything." It was not easy for him to walk away from the enthusiastic onlookers. Really rare, a sparrow trampling an old hen to death, an ant 3 feet long, an old grandpa sitting in a cradle. He shook his head and hummed a song, following Abbot Yangon through the surging crowd. Unfortunately, there were no other children on the street and no one came to sing with him. Suddenly, Abbot Yangon stopped. "Let's stay here for the night." Here. This was neither a monastery nor an inn but a large square. At this time the sun was setting and the lanterns were lit. The square was bustling with noise and excitement. Many people were lined up, singing and dancing. No matter how one looked at it, it was not a place to stay. "Yes, this is the place. All right." Egshing held his cheeks and sat down on the steps, looking at the dancing crowd. The setting sun dyed his face as red as an apple, and he unconsciously smiled. He looked no different from an ordinary child. Abbot Yangon suddenly felt a trace of pity. Perhaps he should not have gotten him involved. Perhaps not only should he not have helped him recover his memory, but he should have helped him completely seal the past. The heroic determination that belonged to Li Qingshan was backed by mountains of corpses, seas of blood, and boundless sins. He was not willing to be like an ordinary cultivator, treating all living beings as ants. If that was the case, he would never be able to feel at ease and would have to bear this sin. Thus he became even more resolute. Even if he were to die in battle somewhere, he would take it as a matter of course. Now that he recalled what he said in the Pure Land Temple in Black Cloud City, it was still deafening and to the point. "I'm laughing at how weak all of you are. You're no different from those fellows who view all life as ants. Because they couldn't bear the pain in their hearts, they had to abandon their good thoughts and lay down the butcher's knife. Both are distorting their hearts, but what's the difference? The heart is compassionate and the heart is evil. Carrying a butcher's knife in hand, killing strong enemies outside, isn't that a pleasure? Why go to the pure land of ultimate bliss? Those who kill will always be killed. Since I killed, I was prepared to be killed. I don't seek bliss, I don't seek longevity, how can a monk measure it?" It wasn't as profound as the Buddhist scriptures, but this great determination and willpower was simply incredible. At this moment, Egshing suddenly jumped up. "I'm going to dance." Those dancers kept teasing him, and in just a short while, he had already learned most of the dance moves. Finally, he could not hold it in any longer and jumped onto the stage. Like a pail of cold water poured into a pot of hot oil, the atmosphere in the square immediately became as enthusiastic as fire. A figure flashed in front of him. It was the old lady who bumped into him. Her figure was abnormally vigorous and she was constantly spinning in circles. "Kid, you came, let's compete." "Let's compete, who's afraid of who?" "I Jiangsu." "I Li Egshing." One old and one young danced in the middle of the square. Everyone surrounded them, cheering, but the dance didn't stop. Zhang Su had been immersed in this path for many years, visited countless dance masters, stepped on countless squares and mastered this dance skill. It was so exciting that people completely forgot her age and were immersed in her dance. However, she was soon astonished and shocked. It was as if this child knew how to dance since birth. Every movement he made was as smooth as flowing water, perfect and flawless. How was this a child? He was clearly a dance master. Soon, she couldn't keep up with his dance steps and was convinced of her defeat. Egshing was in high spirits and defeated the dancers one by one. Cheers surged like waves, and the air was so hot that it seemed like it was about to burn. He danced without restraint, like a storm, like a whirlwind, like a frog in a flurry, like a fighting tiger. It wasn't just the moves he had just learned, but also the Yanko dance, peacock dance, Latin dance, tap dance, and street dance that originated from the past. He became the one and only leader of the dancers and everyone followed his steps. Abbot Yangon shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Forget it, Amir Yangon, What qualifications does he have to help Li Qingshan choose his path? Eggsheng's eyes were half closed, and he forgot everything around him as if he had fallen into a dream. He felt great joy in his heart, and he couldn't express it without dancing. He also felt great anger and he couldn't vent it without dancing. He also felt great sorrow and he couldn't calm down without dancing. Every emotion turned into an action, and it even radiated outside the square, inspiring everyone to do the same action. When the bell rang, a group of armored guards with weapons in their hands approached the plaza. It's getting late, everyone should disperse. Usually, everyone would disperse when they heard the bell, but today no one cared about the guards' urging. Instead, more and more people came from all directions. The guards passed through the crowd and rushed into the center of the square, trying to stop the lead dancer. However, he still danced to his heart's content. Suddenly, a third eye opened on his forehead, shooting out burning divine flames that surrounded his body, preventing the guards from approaching. A statue of a god appeared on his body, wearing a flaming crown on his head, holding a small drum and flames in his hands. He was also dancing, but his movements were extremely slow and full of power. He slowly raised his left leg and his right foot stepped on a flaming halo. His forearms gently stretched out. There was a series of clanging sounds, and even the guards threw away their weapons and danced with him. Their expressions were intoxicated and they forgot their duties. Demonic dance. Abbot Yangon frowned, and it was a little unexpected. He had almost forgotten that Li Qingshan cultivated the Tao of Great Freedom, and now he was displaying the king dance form of the Great Freedom Heaven. There was clearly a trace of divinity in it, and even he couldn't stop it. The flaming halo rotated endlessly, and it symbolized the reincarnation of creation, preservation, and destruction. No one could escape such reincarnation, just like the people in the square at this moment. Even those who never knew how to dance started to dance enthusiastically, and they instantly became dance masters, but they were somewhat like marionettes. Unconsciously, he turned the square into his training field and everyone into his believers. His primordial spirit's cultivation level increased rapidly. The night grew darker and all the lights in the city were extinguished, leaving only this square. The bell struck 12, giving the final warning. Chapter 1581. Roar. Roar. A ferocious beast's roar broke the song and dance. A ferocious beast that looked like a bear appeared out of nowhere. Its entire body was in a terrible state with bone spikes protruding out of its skin. It emitted a dense demonic aura that covered the moonlight and cast a fishy shadow. The beast frantically turned its head, and its viscous saliva dripped onto the ground, immediately corroding a large pit. The commotion in the plaza attracted its attention. Its eyes were filled with a crazed and bloodthirsty light as it pounced forward with its 4 claws. A fishy wind blew against Eggsen's face, and he was startled awake from the demonic dance. He immediately saw the hideous beast and everyone had just stopped dancing. They were still in a trance and had yet to fully wake up. At this crucial moment, Abbot Yangon was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were wide open and his heart was beating rapidly. This was truly a nightmare coming true. If this beast charged into the plaza, countless people would die. He clenched his teeth and charged towards the demon emperor beast. At the moment when they were about to collide, he suddenly realized that his heart was beating like a drum, not because of fear but because of an uncontrollable impulse. He suddenly understood. So the reason why this nightmare is so terrifying is because I have been running all this time. The beast slapped over with its paw, and the air was oppressive and cracked, making him unable to breathe. Right at this moment, there was a cracking sound as if a glacier had cracked, and water gushed out from the crack. Countless memories surged over and he couldn't distinguish them in time. He was stunned for a moment. Boom. The ground split apart and a large pit was formed. He was slapped to the ground by the bear paw. Everyone was completely awake now and they screamed and ran in panic. The guards quickly looked for the weapons that were thrown away, but it was too late. A shadow quickly shrouded over and everyone looked up with shock. A giant beast was descending from the sky, and with this pressure, countless people would die. At this crucial moment a voice shouted, "Chong, chong, chong." Although it was a young child's voice, it clearly had the smell of iron and blood. In an instant, countless brambles pierced through the sky, and like dancing snakes, they pierced through the beast and tightly bound it in midair. Eggsun walked out of the pit step by step. His long hair fluttered without any wind, and his pair of green eyes stared at the beast, glowing with a terrifying radiance. He looked like a beast. In an alley on the side of the square, Abbot Yangon quietly heaved a sigh of relief and put down the staff in his hand. Under the silver moon, the demonic beasts howled mournfully and struggled with all their might. Demonic blood rained down, staining everyone's bodies. Their expressions immediately changed. A man was running out of the square. The person in front of him was a little slower and was immediately pushed aside by him. The person behind him directly stepped over the body of the fallen man without the slightest bit of mercy or modesty. Dan Sheng's pair of green eyes faintly revealed a scarlet color. He lowered his thick brows and clenched his fingers. Die. Even more thorns broke out of the ground and swam through the demon emperor beast's body, tearing apart every inch of its flesh. However, this demon emperor beast's vitality was abnormally strong, and it was still struggling. Egshing snorted coldly and once again charged at the demonic beast. With a flaming halo wrapped around him, he pierced through the demonic beast's huge body and dug out a huge demon heart. The magical beast immediately stopped struggling, and its eyes gradually lost their luster. Eggsun stood on the head of the demonic beast and raised the demonic heart in his hand. Everyone had escaped a calamity, and they all stood still and cheered loudly. However, there was an unusual fanaticism. In the blink of an eye, the singing and dancing plaza had turned into a primitive and bloody hunting ground. The tribesmen offered their most valiant warriors the highest reverence. Everyone had forgotten that the first commandment of Buddhism was not to kill. Eggsun smiled proudly and looked up. There were traces of demonic beasts everywhere in the city. The armored guards were holding weapons and fighting with the demonic beasts. Although these demonic beasts were crazy and bloodthirsty, most of them were not strong. Furthermore, the guards were already prepared and had great teamwork. They easily suppressed them, and killing them was only a matter of time. Other than this square, most of the residents were hiding in their houses and were not affected. Thus, he did not make another move and slowly descended from the sky. The crowd surged forward and lifted him up with their hands, throwing him into the sky again and again as they shouted, "Long live!" From the corner of his eyes, he saw Abbot Yangon's figure and nodded slightly to him. In any case, this method was indeed useful. He had recovered more than half of his memories, and it would take at most 3 to 5 days for him to fully recover. However, he felt inexplicably uneasy as if something was wrong. However, he did not have the time to put the memory fragments together and could not figure out what the problem was. The demonic beast's howls quickly subsided, but the people in the square, perhaps because they were stained with demonic blood, were controlled by an unusual emotion. They surrounded the corpse of the demonic beast and started dancing again. This time the dance was very unusual. The men were pushing and shoving and the women were arguing with each other. The smell of gunpowder was very intense. And some men and women simply hugged each other and touched each other, starting an open party. Because there were more men than women, the distribution was uneven, causing more fights and chaos. Although Eggsun was still young, he still became the target of the women. He had no choice but to jump onto the demonic beast's corpse to avoid these crazy women. The guards were attracted by the commotion here. Seeing this scene, they were all dumbfounded and did not know what to do. Abbot Yangon also shook his head and put his palms together. "Amitabha, I have sinned, I have sinned." If he had personally taken action, the demonic beast would have been eliminated as soon as it appeared, and these people would not have been stained by the demonic blood and broken so many commandments. However, compared to what he was going to do, this kind of sin was nothing. Eggsun could not help but laugh, feeling that it was extremely interesting. If this kind of party was held a few more times in a few years, children would definitely run around the streets. Suddenly, a wave of sleepiness surged up, and he could not help but yawn, remembering that he had not slept for a long time. And the unceasing flow of memories made his head dizzy. He simply lay on the back of the demonic beast and fell asleep, no longer worrying about any nightmares. As for those powerful enemies in the dream, I should not be afraid of them, they should be afraid of me. The long night passed and the red sun rose from the east. The first ray of sunlight shone on the square. Black mist rose from the demonic beast's corpse, and soon the eerie white bones were revealed and quickly dissipated. Eggsun woke up and after a dreamless night he stretched his body. He had grown quite a bit and already looked like a young man. The men and women in the square also woke up, and black mist rose from their naked bodies. They looked at each other and cried out in alarm. Eggsun chuckled and took out the demon heart, only to see that the demon heart was also melting and after a while, it disappeared. The people in the square also ran away. Everything that happened last night gave people an extremely unreal feeling, as if it was a big dream. This was clearly the Elysium, so why were there demonic beasts? Abbot Yangon walked over. "We should go out." Word. Chapter 1582. Genius 1 second. Remember, if you want to go? Talk net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Lan Tua is a Sanskrit sound that means giving without complaint. It means giving dharma, delivering all living beings from suffering, never satisfied. It is also known as the place where the lotus blossoms. The lotus symbolizes wisdom and Buddha nature in the Buddhist scriptures. When mortals reach this place, they will be enlightened and free from all worries. Because Buddha had once preached here, it also had a thunderous name, Big Lain Temple. The sound of Buddha preaching was as loud as thunder. It is the most magnificent, solemn, glorious, and sacred temple in the entire Pure Land of ultimate bliss, perhaps in all the heavens and realms. It is especially so for the monks of the Pure Land sect. It is not an exaggeration to give all the praises in the world to it. When Abbot Rangoon said this, he could not help but smile. Going to the great Thunderclap Temple of ultimate bliss to see Buddha is the dream of all the monks in the world. Egg's heart is drumming. As his memory gradually recovers, the name Great Thunderclap Temple sounds familiar no matter how he hears it. He always feels that it is not a good place to go. At this time they have already passed through the city and are facing a mighty river. The water is turbulent and the waves are surging. At a glance he can't see the other side. Even he feels that the situation is very dangerous. That abbot, I think I better not go. In any case, in a few days his memory and power will be completely restored. At that time he can plan his next step. But no matter where he goes, it is not worthwhile to run to Buddha. Abbot Yangon laughed. Oh, you are afraid? What a joke, what am I afraid of? Since you want to go to the great Thunderclap Temple, you can ask Buddha for help. His magic power is boundless and he can solve it with his little finger. Why bother me? By the way, psychological methods are useless against me. No, even Buddha couldn't do it. Only you can. Of course, if you really don't want to go, I can't force you. Abbot Yangon sighed. If I knew this, I wouldn't have wasted my effort last night and violated all the precepts. It is really unforgivable. Egshing rolled his eyes. Okay, I'll go with you. In order to trick him into helping, this monk really said all sorts of nonsense. He even said, even Buddha can't do it, only you can do it. Even a ghost would not believe such words. All his life he valued keeping his promises and repaying his debts. Even if there was a mountain of daggers or a sea of fire in front of him, he would still walk on it. Besides, since he had been conferred the title of Divine General Sangarama, it was not too much to pay a visit to the higher authorities. With a leap he soared into the sky. With a splash he fell into the water. Abbot Yangon stretched out his hand. Wait. As soon as Egshing flew above the river, he felt that the ground beneath him was empty. He had nothing to rely on. Not only did he fall into the river, no matter how hard he struggled, he still sank to the bottom of the river. Suddenly, his eyes flickered with a deep blue light. Only then did he stop sinking. He hurriedly swam out of the river and spat out several mouthfuls of water. He felt that his mouth was full of sand. Poo. What kind of river is this? Quicksand river. What flows within is the 3,000-week water. Even deities can't fly over it. They can only cross it. There is a saying, 800 quicksand realms, 3,000-week water, goose seedlings can't float, reed flowers will sink to the bottom. To think that you can still swim up. Egshing spat fiercely again. Buddha's rules are too strict. Thinking about it, it made sense. Even ordinary cultivation sects didn't allow people to fly recklessly. However, he was still unhappy. Abbot Yangon raised his eyebrows. Kid, don't spout nonsense. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. I spat sand, it has nothing to do with Buddha. He covered his eyes with his hand and looked around for a while. Let's find a ferry. There is no ferry here. Abbot Yangon shook his head helplessly. Then what should we do? Don't worry, I have already made preparations. Abbot Yangon took out a slightly transparent tortoise shell and threw it into the weak water. It immediately became the size of a small boat and didn't sink. He climbed up first and turned his head. Come up. What is this? Egshing caressed the tortoise shell. Other than the natural patterns on it, there were also many mysterious and simple runes. There was a familiar aura coming from them. The shell of a spirit tortoise, it doesn't sink in water. I found one after much difficulty. I see. Egshing understood. He had the perfect bloodline of the spirit tortoise, that was why he could swim up from the river. He leapt up again. His eyes turned dark blue. He stood firmly on the water and laughed. What's so hard about it? He walked on the water and ran away. Abbot Yangon looked at his back. If I knew this, I wouldn't have looked for this tortoise shell. I could have just let this kid carry me over. Maybe he was destined to do this. Crossing 800 quicksand and 3,000 weak water to reach the other shore. Looking into the distance, the ends of the world were filled with clouds and mist. Above the clouds, there were undulating snowy mountains. The tallest mountain was shaped like a lotus. The sun was setting in the west. A red sun was hanging on the lotus. The sunset dyed the snowy mountains golden red. There were thousands of rays of light and thousands of auspicious colors. It was a magnificent scene. The lotus became more and more beautiful. As the light changed, it seemed to be blooming at all times. Exing could not help but stop. That is, Spirited Mountain. Abbot Yangon's face was solemn. He took off his kasaya and monk robe and bowed deeply towards the Spirited Mountain. Stop pretending. Let's go. However, Abbot Yangon stood up. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps and bowed again. You are. He suddenly understood that Abbot Yangon was bowing every 3 steps to the Spirited Mountain. Hey, you don't have to do this. If you do this, how long are we going to walk? Abbot Yangon did not say anything else. He bowed again and continued to walk forward. He ignored everything around him. In his eyes, there was only the blooming lotus and the glorious snowy mountains. Exing grimaced and shook his head. You are really crazy. Their speed suddenly slowed down. They could only approach the Spirited Mountain step by step. At first he mocked Abbot Yangon a few times. However, there was no response, so he was too lazy to say any more. Fortunately, there were strange flowers and plants everywhere. The scenery was beautiful, so he did not feel bored. Gradually he felt a strange sense of respect. This kind of perseverance was indeed unusual. Moreover, he could actually resist his great taunt technique. It was really extraordinary. Thinking about it, Abbot Rangoon was not the kind of stubborn fanatic believer who followed blindly. The Buddha who was worthy of his worship must be really powerful and merciful. However, he was not willing to worship. It was not only because he did not want to lower his head. In his opinion, if Buddha really had great power and boundless power, he would not have the great mercy to save all living beings. If he really had the great mercy to save all living beings, he would not have the great power and boundless power. Otherwise, this world would have been a pure land of bliss. There would not have been a crazy woman like Chen Rongji. Probably, there would not have been a person like him. However, his speed was faster than he expected. As he got closer and closer to the Spirited Mountain, Abbot Yangon became more and more anxious. One's appearance was born from one's heart. His young and handsome face had also become unshaven and dusty. His expression was also confused and uneasy, as if he was repenting and atoning for his sins, but also as if he was struggling bitterly. Sometimes, Exing had a premonition that the monk would say to him in the next second, "Let's go back." However, he did not say it out loud. He just kept walking and praying. Finally, they arrived at the Spirited Mountain. The magnificent pagoda and the blooming lotus were all right in front of them. At the end of the steps was a grand door, but the door was tightly shut. Abbot Yangon finally stood up and walked up the steps. Exing did not dare to be negligent and followed closely behind. He also felt like he was looking at a holy land. However, it was quiet all around. There was no sound of bells, drums, or chanting. There was not even a ghost in sight. Ordinary monks could not come here, and bodhisattvas and arhats did not need to chant scriptures all day. When he arrived in front of the door, there were still no signs of it opening. Exing went forward and banged on the door. "Open the door, open the door." Where did the guard go? "There's no need to knock. Look up." Abbot Yangon finally spoke. After this round of tempering, his eyes were even more resolute. Exing looked through the crack of the door and saw a post in the middle of the door. There were 6 golden Sanskrit words written on it. Exing clapped his hands. "It's over. It's all your fault for walking too slowly. Buddha went out to do something." Abbot Yangon did not know whether to laugh or cry. "Do you recognize those words?" "Of course." He counted with his fingers. "I have something not at home." Exactly 6 words. Abbot Yangon laughed involuntarily. "I didn't expect you to be so proficient in mathematics. But who would stick a letter on the crack of the door?" The solemn atmosphere in his heart was diluted quite a bit. Exing was unhappy. "What else do you think it is?" "Naturally, it's a seal with the 6 words Wang Ma and I hum me hum written on it." "What a joke! Who dares to seal the door of Buddha's house?" "Wait, could it be?" Chapter 1583. Exing immediately understood what Abbot Yangon meant when he said, "Even Buddha can't do it. Only you can." Looking up at the golden post, a strong sense of déjà vu surged into his heart. He felt that he had heard of this situation somewhere before. But wait, this was a post written by Buddha. How could he, a mere Sangarama divine general, rashly go up and tear it down? Wouldn't that be like the god of longevity eating arsenic, tired of living? Abbot Yangon smiled slightly. You don't have to worry, that is a damning mantra, a golden rule for me. To you it's just a message that says I'm busy and not at home, so what's the harm in taking it down and looking at it? However, Egg kept looking up, causing Abbot Yangon to ask curiously, what are you looking at? I'm afraid that a palm technique will descend from the sky. Not only will it slap a traitorous child like you to death, you'll also implicate me. I've never heard of such a thing. Abbot Yangon let out a long sigh. I'm definitely not a traitor, I'm just looking for an answer. If you're not willing, all right. Egg suddenly agreed. He felt that if Buddha wanted to stop Abbot Yangon, there was no need to wait until now. All he needed was a divine revelation, and this monk would definitely not be stubborn. So, probably there wouldn't be any fatal danger. He floated into the air and came before the post, slowly reaching out to grab it. He couldn't help but hold his breath as his heart palpitated. This was an invitation left by the Gautama Buddha. Apart from the few great sages, all demons, devils, ghosts, and monsters had to avoid it. Who knew what kind of powerful magical powers and spells were contained in it? Maybe the Gautama Buddha didn't even need to do it himself. Whoever exposed it would die. However, he wouldn't be as conflicted as Abbot Yangon. His eyes flashed with determination as he grabbed the post and pulled it forcefully. The post floated down without any resistance. He opened his eyes wide and was on high alert. However, nothing happened. Looking at the post in his hand, it was as if it was really just the most ordinary post. At most, it was made of a more expensive material, made of gold, silk, and satin. At this moment, the door that had been sealed for who knows how many years slowly opened. There was not a single sound. All of a sudden, the bells and drums on the mountain rang out in unison. The sound was like thunder. Golden light radiated from the peak of the mountain, and the lotus seemed to be in full bloom. The light swept across the sky and illuminated the entire Elysium like an aurora. Everyone could see it when they raised their heads. The great Lane Temple, which had been sealed for a long time, was opened once again. A pair of red eyes suddenly opened on a lonely country in the sea, and the pupils shone with golden light. They're finally here. In an instant, Egshing felt like he was being watched. When he turned around, there was nothing. Abbot Yangon stood in front of the great Lane Monastery in a daze. The magnificent and dignified palace pagodas seemed to echo with the voice of Buddha preaching. It was as if one could still hear the intense debate of the monks in the square. Under the guidance of the Buddha, everyone silently explored the deepest wisdom and passionately pursued the method of delivering all sentient beings from suffering. In the end, they formed the world-famous Mahayana Buddhism. That white-boned bodhisattva had once cultivated and studied here. In the end, with his great wisdom and compassion, he convinced all the monks and received the teachings of Buddha. He became the abbot of the great Lane Monastery and was placed with boundless expectations. Abbot Yangon was in a daze. Everything felt like a dream. But why? Why did things turn out like this? What exactly went wrong? His chest rose and fell violently as he shouted in his heart. It took him a lot of effort to calm down. He had a feeling that the answer to all of this was in this great Lane Monastery. Egshing wanted to say, did we cause too much of a commotion? But since things had already come to this, there was nothing to be afraid of. He stuffed the invitation into his clothes and walked into the great Lane Monastery. How could he return empty-handed after entering a treasure mountain? Abbot Yangon went straight to the scripture depository. Egshing had no interest in the scriptures. He had the 9 transformations of the demons and gods, so he didn't need any techniques. He strolled around the great Lane Monastery to see if he could bring back some souvenirs, such as relics. Little one should like it. But this was the pure land of ultimate bliss. Everyone was immortal, so why would relics be left behind? Thus, he strolled around but couldn't find anything worth stealing. Gold bricks? He wasn't a petty thief. Buddha statues? He didn't resell antiques. The spiritual energy in this mountain was extremely dense. It was like flowing liquid. Breathing in could cleanse one's marrow and meridians, changing one's tendons and forging one's bones. Even the 9 heavens couldn't compare. Ever since he entered the Great Lane Monastery, his whole body made cracking sounds and he felt extremely itchy. He grew up at a speed visible to the naked eye. He grew from a teenager to a handsome young man. His head also grew long. If I had 4th brother's ability, I would move this spiritual mountain away. Even if the earth vein is broken, the spiritual energy isn't this dense. I can use it to smash people. Unknowingly, he arrived at the peak of the mountain. The great Buddha's hall stood tall and majestic. There was a lotus pond in front of the hall. Lotus flowers bloomed in the pond. They were of different colors. There were white lotus, green lotus, red lotus, golden lotus, blue lotus. However, the red lotus was fragrant and the lotus leaves were wilted. It seemed a little decadent. However, there was a kind of tranquil Zen feeling that made people forget about the secular world. He took a deep breath. In an instant, the fragrance filled his lungs. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a cool breeze and rushed to the top of his head. In an instant, the gate that sealed his memories collapsed with a loud bang. All of his memories were completely restored and surged forth. He immediately recalled the reason for all of this. Damn it, I sealed my memories to prevent myself from being assimilated. Now that sealing them is useless, I have no other choice. I have to leave this pure land of bliss as soon as possible. However, the fragrance of the flowers still lingered in his lungs. It was still flowing out from the lotus pond and seeping into his body through every pore. His face was flushed red. He swayed as if he had drunk the best wine. Moreover, that little bit of worry was nothing compared to the relief and happiness in his heart. In the end, he plopped to the side of the pond and fell into a deep sleep. And in this completely unconscious situation, he breathed in and out the fragrance of the flowers. His Qilin transformation grew stronger and stronger before breaking through. His forehead swelled up high, giving birth to a pair of tall and straight antlers that flew diagonally behind him. His lion-like head was already covered in mane, and his lion-like body was covered in green scales. Behind him, an ox tail swayed back and forth. He had actually transformed into a legendary Qilin. Although he had not achieved great success, he could be considered to have achieved it. And with his breath, the wilted lotus flowers gradually grew taller and more nourished. The fragrance grew stronger. If he were awake, he would definitely discover one thing. The feeling of staying in this pure land of ultimate bliss was extremely similar to the feeling he had when he transformed into a spirit turtle and swam in the ultimate. That wonderful sense of belonging and recognition from the bottom of his heart did not need to be forced. His temperament was naturally compatible. Supplemented by dense and compatible spiritual qi, the increase of cultivation was as easy as eating and drinking. And he also encountered the same problem. His consciousness was assimilated by the world. Therefore, he was forced to sacrifice his memories in the ultimate and sealed them here. Chapter 1584. Qingshan, let's go. A heavy and tired voice urged. Who is calling who? The Qilin woke up in a daze and shuddered violently. His eyes widened. I remember now. I'm Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan Mountain. When he woke up from his dream, the fragments of his memory fused together and everything became clear and bright. He took a deep breath under the majestic hall of great strength. The fragrance of flowers lingered and the lotuses bloomed even more enchanting. What surprised him was that not only had his strength recovered, but his cultivation level had also increased. The Qilin's longevity scheme had reached the 4th level and he had transformed into a Qilin for the first time. Yes, he had just noticed the changes in his body. This was unusual. Although the 4th level was not low, he still needed to concentrate to use the celestial and demon transformation. Especially the first time, how could he change without realizing it? With a clatter, it stood up and looked around. Where is this place? The Qilin was not very tall. Its shoulder height was about 3 meters, but its 4 hooves were in the air, its antlers were flying, its mane was dancing and its green scales were shining. It had the majesty of a king among all beasts. Its eyes were like those of a fierce tiger, but they were gentle and indifferent, without sorrow or joy as it overlooked the world. Abbot Yangon looked up at it and was amazed. This legendary divine beast was extremely rare and was almost extinct. In the Western Paradise, there were not even ordinary beasts, let alone a Qilin. Yes, this is the great Tempest Temple in the Western Paradise. No, I have to leave now. With the recovery of his memories, it meant that the assimilation had begun. This time he could no longer resist it. The Qilin was about to soar into the sky when he saw the lotus pond. The flowers were blooming beautifully, green, purple, red, and white. They were clean but not enchanting, deeply attracting him. He walked to the lotus pond and leaned over a green lotus, taking a deep sniff. In the blink of an eye, the green lotus withered and fell. The azure glass-like petals fell into the quiet, deep water, stirring up a circle of ripples. As the green lotus withered, Spirited Mountain trembled slightly and the spiritual light quickly dissipated. Wait, this is... Abbot Yangon realized that the lotus pond was the core of the Spirited Mountain. Of course, this was just a metaphor. Everything on the Spirited Mountain was naturally formed, and there was no need to worry about the formation eye. Those lotuses were not ordinary lotuses, nor were they exotic plants. Instead, they were manifestations of laws. This was also a metaphor. The Buddha's metaphor corresponded to the phrase, where the lotus blossoms. However, since it was a law, how could Li Qingshan make it wither? 6 heavenly tribulations were only at the stage of qi refinement and essence soul refinement. They could see the existence of laws, but they could not truly come into contact with the laws. In addition, there were 3,000 grand daos, and all of them ran parallel to each other. Even a true god or true immortal who had tempered his spirit to return to the void would find it difficult to injure this lotus, much less a mere divine general Saran. Unless his cultivation path just so happened to coincide with the laws of this lotus, it would be difficult for him to harm it in the slightest. Li Qingshan, on the other hand, was completely immersed in the wonderful fragrance. After sniffing the green lotus, he went to sniff the red lotus. Stop! With a crash, Abbot Yangon glared angrily and waved his staff, striking down on the Qilin's back. At the critical moment, the staff stopped in midair. Abbot Yangon's veins were exposed, and he was panting like a bull as if he was possessed. Suddenly, he turned his head and glared at the hall of great strength, shattering the green bricks with one step. What's the use of this Nalanda temple? What's the use of this pure land of ultimate bliss? Why don't we just destroy it? The deities and Buddhas in the hall were silent and swayed slightly. It was the spirited mountain beneath their feet that was trembling. The red lotus withered and smelled the white lotus. In the blink of an eye, the lotus flowers withered and the lotus leaves in the pond withered and turned yellow. Thus, the spiritual light dissipated and the spirited mountain shook violently. The magnificent pagoda's walls were peeling and filled with cracks. Even the red paint on the pillars and the gold leaf on the Buddha statues lost their luster. However, the plants grew wildly from the peak to the foot of the mountain. Wormwood grew through the cracks of the green bricks, vines climbed up the mottled walls, and trees broke through the houses of the main hall. In the blink of an eye, the pagoda was in ruins. Wormwood covered the ground and the ancient trees gave shade as if 1,000 years had passed. This glorious Great Laying Temple seemed to have been sealed in the long river of time, remaining in a beautiful dream. As the seal was removed, the dream became reality, and it was immediately washed away by the river water until it was beyond recognition. With a clang, Abbot Yangon threw away the staff in his hand and knelt on the ground. He hugged his head and cried bitterly. His young and handsome face, just like the Great Laying Temple, seemed to have aged a lot in an instant. Many wrinkles appeared at the corners of his lips and eyes, and every wrinkle contained an indescribable sorrow. A gust of cold wind blew mixed with snowflakes. The warm spring weather no longer existed, and only then did one suddenly remember that this was the peak of a high mountain. It was cold at the top, and it was common for snowstorms to be bitterly cold. He finally found the answer and realized that he could not bear it. Li Qingshan seemed to have absorbed all the spiritual energy of the spirited mountain. His Qilin strategy of longevity advanced to the 5th level. Although the lotus flowers in the pond had all withered, they bloomed in his heart. His mind had never been as clear as it was now. It was not like the spirit turtle, calculating to the extreme. Instead, it was a comprehension that could see through everything with a single glance. These lotus flowers must have been personally planted by the Buddha. They had the same aura as the scroll. The only question was why he could touch these lotus flowers. Is it because I'm a Qilin? No, that's not all. As a Khanate god, he could sense the existence of the great Tao at birth. Compared to those ignorant and muddle-headed living beings, he could be said to have one at the starting line. Furthermore, under the guidance of the great Tao, there were almost no inner demons or bottlenecks. However, he had to go through the process of cultivation and constantly accumulate strength to clearly understand the great Tao, and even take a step forward to touch it. With his current cultivation realm, he did not have this ability at all. There was only one explanation. It's this world that gave me this ability, allowing me to see and touch. The feeling here is very similar to Ruin's End. It's like returning to my home. The world responded to his every move. He looked down at the spiritual mountain and the vegetation that grew wildly. Then there's only one answer. This isn't some paradise but the home of the Qilin. This must be the world formed by the primordial Qilin. Furthermore, just like the primordial spirit turtle, it was very likely that it had died in the battle of mending the heavens, and turned into this paradise. It was then occupied by the Buddhists and became the so-called paradise. What he did not know was that as the lotus flowers withered, the paradise was in chaos. Demonic beasts ran amok everywhere in the city, running around in broad daylight. How dare you? How dare you open the seal and destroy the Tempest Temple? What punishment do you deserve? A furious voice resounded through the sky. The Sangha god's body became even larger than the spiritual mountain. His face was green and his brows were raised in anger. He gritted his teeth so hard that it sounded like thunder. He held the twin maces in his hands. Protecting the temple was the most important mission of the Sangha god, and the Tempest Temple was even more important. However, after this place was sealed, he could not come and go without permission. The moment the Tempest Temple opened, he sensed it and immediately flew over. However, he was blocked by the Ruo River and could not fly over. It took him some effort to cross the Quicksand River. When he saw the miserable state of the Tempest Temple, he was infuriated. If not for the Tempest Temple below, he would have smashed them into meat paste with his maces. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He immediately felt the power of a god. This is going to be big. Can I pretend that I'm just an innocent and kind-hearted little Qilin that is passing by? Anyway, everyone knows that Qilin is a benevolent beast and would not do bad things. However, if the Sangha god knew that I'm Li Qingshan, I'm afraid it will go crazy. Abbot Yangon fell to the ground. Your Holiness, this is all my fault. It has nothing to do with Li Qingshan. You. Li Qingshan spat out a mouthful of blood. Li Qingshan? The Sangha god's eyes narrowed. He immediately saw through the Qilin's identity. So it's you? It's you? Li Qingshan laughed dryly. It's me. I haven't seen you in a long time, boss. Hey, since we're all living in the same temple, why don't you let me go? Actually, we didn't do it on purpose. Don't you think so, Master Yangon? The Sangha god suddenly put away his anger and threw down his maces. Two loud thuds could be heard. Li Qingshan heaved a sigh of relief. He didn't think that making friends with the Sangha god would work. Chapter 1585. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Shua, the corner of Li Qingshan's mouth twitched. Damn it, we're done for this time. Looking at Abbot Yangon again, he had already closed his eyes and was waiting to be slaughtered. Bastard, you're the one who brought me to this damned place. Take responsibility for it. However, he had to admit that if he hadn't courted death by sniffing those lotuses and turned the Great Lane Temple into this state, the Garan deity might not have been so furious. Perhaps it would have just taught him a lesson. But it was too late now. If apologies were useful, what was the use of divine powers? When a true god was enraged, the earth would collapse and the mountains would collapse. After praying to the Tathagata Buddha, Goddess Garan's fair and supple skin had turned as red as lava. His originally gentle face was now as ferocious as an evil spirit. His blood-red eyes widened as he slowly lowered his gaze. Boom. Li Qingshan's pupils constricted as he felt a mountainous pressure bearing down on him. His legs went soft and he almost knelt on the ground. However, the bricks under his feet did not crack at all, as if it was just an illusion. No, this is not an illusion. This was the oppression of the laws. After becoming a true god, he could already control the laws and he didn't even need to use spells. Every move he made contained great might and dignity. As the guardian deity, the blue deity had slain countless evil demons. His baleful aura was one of the strongest in the entire Buddhist sect. Hey, evil creature, hand over your life. A fierce shout, like a sudden clap of thunder, the angry roar of a lion. Li Qingshan's heart trembled violently. His internal organs shifted and his liver and gallbladder felt like it was about to split apart. His entire body felt limp and powerless and fresh blood gushed out of his mouth. The lion's roar was also known as the lion's roar technique. It was one of the most common magical techniques in Buddhism. Not only could many cultivators use it, but it was also a common technique that even Jianghu experts with some inner force could use. However, when it was cast by a true god, using the formless laws as a medium, its destructive power was so great that even Li Qingshan's fiend god body could not withstand it. If not for the fact that he had hidden his primordial spirit in the deepest part of the small world, he might have been destroyed by the roar. Love go, small say, Netchu. However, it did not harm a single blade of grass or tree in the great Thunderclap temple. The abbot Yangon, who was nearby, only heard an angry roar. Seeing the Kirin wobble and refuse to fall, the blue god was a bit surprised. Seeing that the great Lane temple had been destroyed, he was enraged. He looked like he was about to slay a demon and he didn't hold back at all. She had thought that a mere divine general who had just undergone 6 heavenly tribulations would immediately collapse to the ground, but she was still able to hold on. However, his face darkened. He was merely struggling at death's door. Accept your fate. Zhang Xian said as he stretched his hand forward. Li Qingshan's vision darkened as if dark clouds were covering his head. Under the gaze of those eyes, not only did the pressure not weaken in the slightest, it became even heavier. It was as if he was trapped in an invisible cage and was heavily injured, unable to resist. This is the gap between man and God. In the palm of a god, the Qilin god beast was like a pig or a dog. This is the origin of those nightmares? That fear, that anger, that despair? Hey, it's still the same recipe and it's still the same familiar smell. Roar. The Kirin roared and all beasts roared in unison. At this moment of life and death, the ox demon, tiger demon, and ape demon, who had been assimilated by this world and gradually retreated, all returned to their original state. They became obsessed, stubborn, and bloodthirsty beasts. Rumble. The blue god's fingers closed. In an instant, the Kirin's four hooves flew into the air, breaking through the invisible cage and leaped out from between the fingers. The indigo god was slightly taken aback. His sure kill claw had missed. As the god of the blue god, he specialized in combat. In terms of combat ability, he was even better than ordinary arhats and true immortals. Moreover, in the home field of the Western Paradise, he could easily capture any kind of demon with a stare, a shout, and a grab. But just now, the laws of heaven and earth fluctuated strangely, distorting the laws he controlled. Even now, it was still fluctuating like ripples spreading outwards, but also like a whirlpool spinning inwards. At the center of the ripples and whirlpools was Li Qingshan. Having escaped death, Li Qingshan's heart was filled with joy. It was the joy of being alive. He opened the divine eye on his forehead and saw the changes in the laws of the world, which made him even more certain of his speculation. The original appearance of this world was the legendary Qilin Paradise. Although he had no idea what method the Buddhists had used to turn this place into a so-called Western Paradise, the origin of the world could not be changed so easily. The lotus flowers were the materialization of the origin, condensed by the Buddha. It was probably to protect the Tempest Temple, but it was also a method of suppression. He caused the lotus flowers to wither, obtaining the origin, and releasing the origin, returning the Western Paradise to the Qilin Paradise. The world protected him. Endless life force surged through his body, rapidly healing his wounds. The child of destiny, no, the ruler. It was just like how the spirit turtle was the ruler of the ruin's end. This was not the home field of the blue god, but his. Although this was nowhere near enough to make up for the difference between the two of them, it gave him a sliver of hope. He did not attempt to flee the Tempest Temple. Instead, he leapt into the grand hall. This was the largest hall he had ever seen in his life. The ceiling seemed even higher than the sky, covered in beautiful murals. There were goddesses, dragons, elephants, temples, scriptures, and so on. They were all shrouded in hazy clouds. He could only raise his head to look at them and he immediately felt insignificant. Tall, dignified statues of gods, bodhisattvas, arhats, heavenly kings, wisdom kings. All the gods of Buddhism were present. They were either in deep thought, silent with their eyes closed, or beaming with joy. They were in a myriad of forms, vivid and lifelike. The blue god could only sit at the end of the table here. Under the gaze of the divine eye, a beam of light pierced through the ceiling and entered the statue. The eyes shone brightly, glaring at him furiously. Are all the gods and Buddhas watching me? The thought gave him a fright, but on further thought, I've already come this far, so what's there to be afraid of? I'll die with my eggs in the sky, and I'll live for tens of thousands of years if I don't die. Instead, he found it interesting and couldn't help but laugh like a proud monkey. To the demonic ape, there was nothing that couldn't be joked about. The blue god statue suddenly shook its body and walked down from the altar with the twin maces in its hands. With heavy footsteps, it approached with a murderous aura, wanting to drive him out of the grand hall. The heavy pressure was still everywhere, but under the protection of the laws of heaven and earth, it was not enough to hold him in place. However, he knew very well that he couldn't even deal with this god statue. If a few more gods and Buddhas descended, the scene would be too beautiful. However, perhaps it was because the Tempest Temple was sealed by the Gautama Buddha, which cut off the connection with the outside world. Those god statues remained motionless, only silently watching him. He rolled over and dodged the twin maces in a sorry state. He transformed back into his human form, rolled his eyes and pointed at the blue god statue. Stop, if you dare to make another move, I'll smash this place into pieces. As he said this, he kicked a long-browed arhat beside him. With a loud bang, he smashed a big hole in the ground, and his long eyebrows were also broken. Stop, you get out of here. The blue god's angry roar reverberated through the dome, but it didn't dare to act rashly for fear of breaking the vases. "Ha, it's better if you get out of here." Li Qingshan grabbed the Sangharama statue and tossed it out the door viciously before closing the door behind him. At this time he had already reached the depths of the Grand Hall. He looked up at the Gautama Buddha in the center and suddenly smiled. Outside the hall, the blue god angrily questioned Abbot Yangon, "Did you bring him here?" Abbot Yangon smiled bitterly. "Yes, it was me." "Why did you do this?" I was wrong. Abbot Yangon shook his head and his face became even older. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. If it was just opening the seal without permission he could bear the sin. However, at this point, Li Qingshan couldn't escape death. He couldn't hide inside for the rest of his life, so he was just stalling for time. He let out a long sigh. "Qingshan, it's all my fault." Before he had even finished speaking, there was a great rumble, and the entrance of the Grand Hall was smashed to pieces. Li Qingshan rushed out from inside, turning into a demonic god that stood as tall as a mountain. He held the great Buddha statue hostage with one hand and wrapped his other around the Buddha's neck. He angrily shouted, "Let me go!" Abbot Yangon was stunned. Li Qingshan glanced at him. I almost forgot about you. Don't panic, I have a hostage." He angrily shouted at the blue god, "Let us go." The blue god's face twisted, and his chest heaved up and down. He was so angry that his whole body was trembling. He had cultivated his mind for a lifetime, but he couldn't suppress his anger. Chapter 1586. Do you think I dare? Li Qingshan sneered. The blue deity was shocked. This young man had no fear at all. He could not help but ask, "Do you know what this statue of Buddha in the Tempest Temple means?" Li Qingshan looked around and answered calmly, "A dilapidated temple and a clay statue." The great Thunderclap Temple had indeed become dilapidated. However, compared to the original solemn and silent atmosphere, the grass was now long and the nightingales were flying, and the trees were giving shade. It seemed full of life. The bright moon hung high in the sky and shone down. The bodhisattvas and arhats sat quietly in the mottled light. They seemed to have the joys and sorrows of mortals. Only the Buddha statue that was held hostage by Li Qingshan still had a faint smile on its face. Dong dong dong. He knocked on the head of the Buddha statue. "You're wrong. It's not a clay statue, it's gold. However, to me gold is no different from mud." I see. The blue deity's anger disappeared. The anger of the Sangharama deity also turned into understanding. These words were not meant to slander the Buddhist sect, but were the most sincere thoughts. This attitude, it was too familiar. Outside the vast sea, the pair of golden eyes watched everything silently. He laughed. "Old man Buddha, this is your day. This young man is too interesting. Interesting, really interesting. This young man is more dangerous than the demons in the demon domain. We must not let him leave this place alive." The blue deity suddenly made up his mind. He put his palms together and bowed to the sky. "Reporting to the revered one, please forgive me for my incompetence. I cannot protect the three treasures." "Wait. I was just saying. You don't have to take it seriously." Li Qingshan's expression froze. He had already guessed what the blue deity was going to say next. This trick again. "You are the guardian deity of Buddhism. What happened to faith?" The abbot did not know whether to laugh or cry. A dilapidated temple and clay statue? Li Qingshan did not wait for the blue deity to flip the table. He hugged the Buddha statue tightly, twisted his waist, and threw it with all his might. Go. Whoosh. The Tathagata Buddha statue shot straight into the sky, passing right in front of the Kailan deity. If it had been a blur, one would have thought that the Buddha had manifested his spirit. At the same time, Li Qingshan's feet stamped on the ground. He grabbed Abbot Yangon and soared into the sky. The instant he jumped off the cliff, he unfolded his wings and whistled through the air. The blue god flew into the sky and held the Tathagata Buddha statue in his hand. He couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Although he had already made up his mind, it was still best not to damage the Buddha statue. His divine eyes were like lightning, coldly sweeping over. Evil creature, your time has come. Li Qingshan felt a chill run down his spine. He shuddered and looked back. The blue god descended from the sky and respectfully returned the Buddha statue to the hall of great strength. He was not in the slightest bit anxious. He would be able to catch up in an instant. How could a divine general be faster than a true god? Moreover, this was the Western paradise, so where could he escape to? It was as easy as catching a turtle in a jar. It would be difficult for him to escape death. Li Qingshan was well aware of this. Evil rose in his heart and anger grew in his heart. He suddenly stopped and turned to face the spirit mountain under the cold moon. He frowned and opened his eyes wide, revealing a ferocious tiger's face. "Are you done cursing me?" A strange look flashed in the blue god's eyes. This child always exceeded his expectations. Under the pressure of his divine might, he actually dared to stop and turn to face him. This kind of courage, this kind of boldness, was not something a divine general could possess. The blue god's killing intent hardened. If he didn't kill him here today, he would definitely become a great threat in the future. He pointed his halberd at Li Qingshan. "Evil creature, what can you do to me? I'll know after I try." Li Qingshan reached into his robes and grabbed the mountain-shifting token. He waved it at the spirit mountain. In an instant, a loud sound shook the heavens and earth. Under the cold moon, the spirit mountain actually began to slowly collapse and press down on the blue god. The blue god was dumbfounded. "No, this is impossible. This is impossible. How can a mere divine general possess such power? You can bow again now." Li Qingshan sneered and raised his eyebrows. He imitated the blue god's voice and said, "Please forgive this disciple for being useless. I can't even protect the great thunderclap temple." Wah! Ah! The blue god could only watch as the mountain pressed down on him. If he wanted to dodge, he could, but this was the spirit mountain. Protecting the Nalanda temple had been his first mission. Every brick, every tile, every blade of grass, every tree here was entrusted with great aspirations and glory. This was something that outsiders could not understand. He roared angrily. Not only did he not flee, but he spread his arms wide and used his chest to press against the toppling mountain. He used all of his divine power to support the spirit mountain. Abbot Yangon stared at this scene in a daze. Suddenly, tears gushed out of his eyes. He reached out as if he wanted to lend the blue god a hand. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As the two forces collided, countless pagodas collapsed and the statues and murals shattered. The veins on the blue god's forehead bulged. Its muscles bulged as it pressed against the spirit mountain, trying to hold it upright. However, it destroyed even more pagodas. Its eyes were about to pop out of its sockets as it gritted its teeth. Li Qingshan. This lion's roar was filled with violence. Li Qingshan was sent flying. His bones cracked and were covered in cracks. He spat out a mouthful of blood. "Very good, you finally remembered my name. Even if I have to die here today, I will let you know what pain is. Earth, fire, wind, water, ox, tiger, scaled, and tortoise." The small world revolved and poured all of its power into the mountain-shifting token. He waved it at the spirit mountain. Fall. The spirit mountain continued to topple. The blue god could not hold on any longer. Its eyes widened in despair as it vaguely saw an incomparably large figure behind Li Qingshan. A pair of clear yellow lion-like eyes stared at it. The great saint of the moving mountain. In a faraway country, the pair of golden eyes blinked. Stupid lion. It subconsciously stopped smiling. Fourth brother? Abbot Yangon could not hold it in any longer. He shouted, "Li Qingshan, stop. Stop. If this goes on, everything will be destroyed, destroyed." He covered his face and cried. Unknowingly, he had become as old as Li Qingshan when they first met. Li Qingshan let go of him. "Monk, I will fight him to the death. Run. Spread the truth about what you have discovered, and our trip will not have been in vain." Although he did not know what Abbot Yangon had discovered in the Tempest Temple that had shaken him so much, it should be detrimental to the Buddhist sect. "No, I can't." Abbot Yangon looked terrified. Li Qingshan stared at him. "Then come and kill me. This is the simplest way to protect the spirit mountain and the Buddhist sect." He had poured all of his power into the mountain-shifting token. There was no way he could resist. "I can't." Abbot Yangon shook his head. "Sai, why do you have to do this?" Li Qingshan took a step forward. The mountain-shifting token pressed down inch by inch. He was determined to fight the gods. Under the pressure of these two godly powers, the spirit mountain gradually shattered and collapsed. The blue god roared angrily and refused to give up. It was buried by millions of tons of rocks. The spirit mountain collapsed. The main hall, the pagoda, the bell tower. The goddess, the dragon elephant, the sutra. The bodhisattva, the arhat, the wisdom king. Chapter 1587. Abbot Yangon closed his eyes in pain. Amit Ba. The spiritual mountain collapsed, and the surrounding snow mountains collapsed as well. The rumbling echoed in the world. Li Qingshan's right hand was torn, and the mountain-shifting token in his hand was dyed red. It trembled uncontrollably. He grabbed his wrist with his left hand and slowly lowered his right arm. He let out a long breath. However, he could not escape from the pure land of ultimate bliss. Everything was in vain. The Sangarama deity had not suffered a fatal blow. It was only a matter of time before it broke free from the soil and rocks. Boom. 10,000 tons of soil and rocks were thrown into the sky, and an arm reached out from the ruins. It suddenly pressed down on the ground, supporting its majestic body. Millions of tons of soil and rocks flew everywhere, and the ground rumbled. Li Qingshan's eyes twitched, and then he smiled. A god was really powerful. The Sangarama deity insisted on holding the spiritual mountain, which was equivalent to being smashed in the face by the spiritual mountain. It actually had such terrifying strength. He really had no other choice now. The mountain-shifting token could only command the mountains in the world. It had no effect on a collapsed mountain. That was beyond the laws of nature. Monk, there's something I forgot to ask. Where did those demonic beasts come from? Li Qingshan suddenly had an idea. Don't tell me they were also brought here by Buddha? Now that he thought about it, Abbot Yangon had brought him to that city. He had obviously predicted that there would be demonic beasts and wanted to stimulate his memory. Before the demonic beasts came, there were guards who started to disperse the crowd and sound the alarm. They were completely used to it. The path was always connected. If the demonic beasts could come, I could go. A ray of hope lit up the path ahead. They will appear at midnight, but once they are illuminated by the sun, they will disappear. As for the rest, I'm not sure. Abbot Yangon's words were vague. It was obvious that he was hiding something. Midnight, no wonder the bell tolls 12 times. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. He immediately grasped the key point. That ray of hope became even more dazzling. Midnight was the beginning of Yang, but it was also the time of extreme yin. There had to be some loophole in Buddha's modification of this Chilan paradise. Otherwise, there would be no reason for the demonic beast to come in. He still didn't know that because of the withering of the lotus in the pond, magical beasts were running amok everywhere in the Elysium. He raised his head and glanced at the dark sky. It was almost midnight. There was still about an hour left. The crux of the problem now was how to hold on until then. The blue divine god's mountainous back had already risen up from the ruins. Let alone 2 hours, even a quarter hour was enough to kill him 100 times over. Boom. The blue god's head popped out of the ground and roared, Li Qing. A huge mountain came head-on, and with a boom, it smashed his head and back heavily into the earth and rocks. Mountain. Li Qingshan said the last word on his behalf, then put down the mountain-shifting medallion in his hand. If he suffered another lion's roar, even if he was stunned for just a moment, he would definitely die. Of the 3 mountains that the mountain-shifting great sage had given him, the Yellow Cliff Peak had crushed Flowerless Ghost Immortal to death, and this was the second Wolf-Fang Mountain. Unlike Mount Numinous, these 3 mountains were Khanate Dharma treasures that had been refined and contained the power of laws. Even the blue divine god had a splitting headache after suffering such a blow. There was a crack on its back as if it had been broken. In particular, it felt suffocated, and its organs were displaced. It could not recover in a short period of time. Amit Ba, 4th brother, please watch over us. Li Qingshan said to Abbot Yangon, don't take it too hard. It's just a mountain. I'll return it to you. Moreover, because it had landed on the ruins of Mount Numinous, this Wolf-Fang Mountain was even taller and steeper than Mount Numinous. It would probably not take long for flowers and trees to grow again, and the top of the mountain would be covered in snow. However, there would no longer be messy murals and statues. It would be a clean expanse of whiteness. Abbot Yangon could not bring himself to laugh at this joke. He stared blankly at Wolf-Fang Mountain and suddenly understood something. He murmured, mountains come and go, flowers fall and bloom. Success, residence, destruction, and emptiness, there is no exception. Li Qingshan could not understand his gatha and was desperately thinking of a countermeasure. First, he would try his best to increase the distance between them and fly tens of thousands of miles in one go. But to a deity, distance was meaningless when it came to shrinking the earth into an inch and being so close yet worlds apart. Next, he would run to a large city and use the citizens as hostages to threaten the blue divine god. Not to mention whether the blue divine god would fall for this, he was not willing to do such a stupid thing. Or he might as well use the mysterious ancient bronze sword to kill the blue divine god while it could not move. But how could it be so easy to kill a god? He thought of several countermeasures and rejected them one by one. After thinking about it, there was only one method that might work. Monk, I should go. Do you want to come with me? Forget it. I'm afraid I can't protect you. Anyway, the blue divine god will definitely come looking for me. It won't be difficult for you to hold out until midnight. Let's go our separate ways. Wait. The Yangon abbot took out a book from his bosom and passed it to Li Qingshan. If you can escape alive, please pass this to the white-boned successor. Li Qingshan took the book. It was a thin folded book and there was no name on the cover. When he opened it, there was not a single word inside. What book is this? But Abbot Yangon said, I should go too. He did not fly but sat in a lotus position in the air with his palms together. His aged face shone with light, clear and transparent, as if he had put down a heavy burden. His expression was serene and he was silent. Li Qingshan was stunned. He reached out and touched it. His body turned into dust and dissipated, along with the secret he discovered in the great Thunderclap Monastery. Hey, it was easy for you to leave. Li Qingshan shook his head. He did not know whether he should be happy for him or sad for him. The wolf ivory mountain in the distance shook violently, as if it would collapse at any time. He stuffed the book into his bosom and happened to touch something. Immediately he thought of a story. He flew to the top of Wolf Ivory Mountain and spat on the rock wall. Go! With a smack, he pasted the letter with the great bright incantation on it. The mountain was still shaking violently, and the letter slowly slid down. Yes, fairy tales are all lies. Li Qingshan turned around and fled, disappearing into the horizon in a ray of light. In the blink of an eye, he arrived above the Ruoxue River again. He felt empty around him and immediately fell down. However, this was his goal. The moment he entered the water, he turned into a spirit turtle. With a plop, he dove into the depths of the surging Ruoxue River. He chose a place to hide and retracted his head and limbs into his shell. He concealed all his aura and concealed all his fate. At the same time, a mirror clone rushed into the sky, carrying his aura and fate. It passed through the 3,000 Ruoxue River and flew into the distance. There was still more than an hour before midnight. This was his only chance to survive. With the talent of the pure-blooded spirit turtle, he could conceal himself to the end. The coward would follow his heart. Chapter 1588. The spirit turtle lurked at the bottom of the quicksand river, blending in with the water. It was like a heavy rock that had been buried for 1,000 years. It had no aura, no fate, no sorrow or joy. It was separated from everything, avoiding all the troubles of the mortal world. Li Qingshan seemed to forget about his main body as well, devoting all of his attention to his clone. The fierce winds whistled past his ears as he rapidly approached the horizon, crossing thousands of kilometers of pure land in a single breath. Whether it was the city, the wilderness, the forest, or the lake, they all blurred into brilliant colors. The yellow city, the green wilderness, the black forest, and the blue lake. The colors blended and wove together, constantly changing. It was enough to make him dizzy. However, he dared not relax at all. All he did was constantly push harder and harder. If the phoenix wings faltered for even the slightest moment, they would be ripped to shreds by the incoming wind. Even with that being the case, the clone gradually broke apart and collapsed from the inside. With the major accomplishment of the spirit turtle, he could pour all of his power into his mirror clone. However, the clone could not possess the reaction speed and toughness of his main body. Even if it did possess power, it could not unleash it completely. However, this was already enough. He could pass off the fake as the real one. He did not need to react fast, nor did he need to last for too long. He only needed to flee for an hour. The riverbed shook. If he had not sensed it carefully, he would not have sensed it at all. The Wolf Fang Mountain collapsed. The Samara god finally broke free from the gaze of the orange-yellow eyes. Its armor was damaged and its back was bruised, oozing with blood. It seemed rather miserable. It raised its head and gazed in the direction Li Qingshan had fled in. It did not roar or bellow. Instead, it was unusually calm. It was no longer an attitude of looking down on him and cleaning up after him. Instead, it treated him as an equal or even like it was facing a great enemy. Since the mountain-moving medallion had appeared, the great tribulation of the world would descend once more. It was not for these statues, nor was it for the great lightning monastery, but for the entire Buddhist sect. Li Qingshan, you must die here. His eyes were like lightning, crossing the horizon in a single instant and locking onto Li Qingshan, who was thousands of kilometers away. He held his truncheons upside down and took a step forward. He had already arrived on the banks of quicksand. Afterwards, he spent some time crossing the river and took another step, arriving another 1,500 kilometers away. With a speed of 3,000 miles per step, he crossed mountains, rivers, and lakes, chasing after Li Qingshan. Suddenly, a large city that stretched for hundreds of miles appeared on the horizon. It was the place where he was going to land next. He only needed to slow down a little or take a detour to avoid this city. However, he didn't hesitate in the slightest. With a step into the city, he disappeared beyond the horizon. Only a deep footprint was left behind, and it immediately triggered a huge earthquake. Countless houses and buildings collapsed, and wails could be heard everywhere. The blue god took its 8th step. It was already standing in front of Li Qingshan. It crossed its maces in front of him and unleashed a shocking attack. Boom. Without any room for maneuver, the mirror avatar burst like a bubble. Under the water, Li Qingshan opened his eyes and was also shocked. Even if it's my original body, I can't withstand this attack. Even the nirvana of the phoenix is useless. This was the difference between a god and a human. Once he was found, he would die. Less than a quarter of an hour had passed, and he had to hold on for at least another 45 minutes. The blue god frowned and closed its eyes. His thoughts were like lightning. It immediately opened and caught a thread of fate. Hiding in the water, yes, the water. He returned to the quicksand bank in a few steps. Looking at the murky and surging water, the clue was broken. If it was an ordinary river, he could clear it with a wave of his hand. However, this water was not ordinary water. Even immortals would find it difficult to cross. All spells and abilities were restricted. It was indeed the best place to hide. Are you the only one with an avatar? The blue god snorted coldly. Its mountain-like body suddenly collapsed and turned into millions of small blue gods. They rushed into the water and the water level immediately rose. Since abilities were useless, then he would use the most primitive method to search for him. He would search inch by inch in the water. Li Qingshan's heart was like the deep sea. He was silent and motionless. He was not shocked, angry, or afraid. The river surged and passed. Time passed bit by bit. Quarter after quarter, it was getting closer and closer to midnight. Yin flourished and Yang waned. The darkness deepened as if they had returned to the ruins of End. The blue god searched more than half of the river and quickly approached Li Qingshan's position. At this time, every second was slow and sluggish. There was still a quarter of an hour left. The blue god's army followed the riverbed and was already 10 miles away. 10,000 feet. 3,000 feet. 100 feet. Found it. Millions of blue gods shouted in unison, shaking the water and causing huge waves to surge. Li Qingshan drew his sword and stood up, cleaving through the raging waves. The sword chi was cold, and with a single slash, nearly 1,000 small blue gods were wiped out. However, this was only a drop in the ocean. In an instant, all the avatars merged into one and looked down from the clouds. Wait, I have something to say. Li Qingshan shouted, hoping to buy a little more time. Yes, just a little more was enough. However, what answered him was a cross of the two maces. This shocking strike had not yet landed, but the sound of the two maces clashing had already caused his primordial spirit to tremble. He was almost unable to hold the ancient bronze sword. The invisible interweaving laws of heaven and earth sealed off all possibilities of evasion. There was no time to transform into a Qilin, no time to take out the mountain-moving token. At this critical juncture, every second was precious and difficult to obtain. He did not even have time to think. Only 2 words appeared in his mind: it's over. Boom. 800 miles of quicksand and 3,000 miles of water were cut in half. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes and produced a thump. His heartbeat sounded like thunder. I'm not done. Time was still passing. The river water that had flown into the sky poured down like a torrential rain, pouring into the empty riverbed. His black eyes reflected a golden-red figure that caught the descending maces. The blue god's expression changed, but no matter how much his muscles bulged and his hair stood up in anger, the maces could not fall another inch. Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. You are, under the phoenix feather purple gold crown, his golden hair fluttered like the sun. He looked back and smiled as innocent as a newborn child. His golden eyes seemed to see through his past and present lives. Traitor. The blue god's angry roar shook the heavens and earth, but there was a hint of helplessness in his anger. The golden eyes turned to look at the blue god. He pursed his lips and waved the maces away. He picked his ear with his little finger and took out a golden needle. With a wave of his hand, he turned it into a pillar and stabbed it upwards, as if he wanted to poke a hole in the sky. The blue god's mountain-like body was sent flying, and no one knew where it went. Li Qingshan was about to go forward, but it was already midnight. Yin and Yang changed, and the extreme Yin gave birth to Yang. In that instant, the laws of heaven and earth in the pure land of ultimate bliss seemed to slow down. Vaguely, he could feel demonic energy surging and hear the roars of demonic beasts. Between heaven and earth, Countless devil lairs suddenly opened and then quickly closed. Kid, you are the one chosen by Old Bull. You are more interesting than I thought. Li Qingshan grew slightly accustomed to the gaze from the pair of scarlet golden eyes. Only now did he notice that it was the most beautiful face he had ever seen in his life. It was not the so-called handsomeness of the secular world, but a kind of flawless beauty. A demonic cave suddenly opened below him. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should go in. A hand pressed on his chest and pushed gently. We will meet again. Wait. Li Qingshan fell into the demonic cave. The darkness closed in front of him, and the scarlet figure disappeared. He felt lost. Above the Rua Shui, the golden eyes suddenly looked up, through the layers of clouds, the heavens, and beyond the starry sky. He laughed angrily. Old man Rulai, the tribulation is here. Let's see how long you can trap me. Under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha lay peacefully. He supported his head with his right arm and opened his left hand. As if he had heard something, he looked down at his palm and met the pair of scarlet gold eyes. The pure land of ultimate bliss was in his palm. Their eyes met for a moment and he smiled. He propped himself up and looked around. There were golden bricks everywhere and golden leaves danced in the wind. A gust of wind blew and there was a strange rhythm. It was accompanied by the strange chirping of birds, which calmed one's mind. Chapter 1589. In a desolate desert in the demonic realm, the barren land was devoid of life. A few withered bushes trembled in the cold wind. The gloomy, low-hanging clouds were like a dirty, thick cloth. Even the rocks were suffocated, and they had been crushed into gravel after years of perseverance. A figure suddenly broke through the clouds and descended from the sky. Before he landed on the ground, he stopped in mid-air. Wah! Torrential rain poured down on Li Qingshan's face. He clenched his fists and looked down at the desolate land. After confirming that there was no threat, he slowly put down his fists and let out a long sigh. He relaxed and opened his arms to the sky, letting the torrential rain wash over him as he laughed heartily. His laughter was like rolling thunder. The pressure of the Sangha deity was too great. Coupled with the assimilation of the pure land of ultimate bliss, he had to be tense at all times. Now he had finally escaped. Fighting a strong enemy and breaking through a desperate situation. Wasn't it great? Everything was still vivid in his mind, especially that pair of golden eyes. They were so clear that they were like a brand. It made his blood boil and he couldn't calm down for a long time. Could he be a traitor? No, why would a traitor save me? Moreover, we are different from those fellows in the sky. You have to believe. Great sage Yuan Feng's words still echoed in his ears. But the suppression of the great sages must have something to do with him. Otherwise he wouldn't be so angry and sad. That sentence of "you have to believe" seemed more like he was trying to persuade himself. Moreover, the Sangha deity also called him a traitor. He must have converted to Buddhism. What's going on? Li Qingshan thought about it but couldn't figure it out. He didn't want to waste any more time. After all, the truth would be revealed one day. If they were friends, then they would work together to fight the gods and Buddhas. If they were enemies, then they would fight to the death. Even if his position as Old Eight changed a little, his transmigration would not be in vain. Haha, my big saber is thirsty. Unfortunately, he didn't have a saber now. He only had an ancient bronze sword of unknown origin. He couldn't use it carelessly. He always felt that there was some conspiracy behind it. However, he could not bear to lose it. Now that he was about to fight the Cheongqi, he would have an additional weapon that could save his life at a crucial moment. Forget it. Let's talk about it after I settle my bet with Cheongqi and transcend the seventh heavenly tribulation. At that time, I should be able to understand the secrets of this sword. For ordinary cultivators, becoming a human immortal was already extremely difficult. If they wanted to become a true immortal, their chances were practically slim. Even if they were to spend 10,000 years, they still might not be able to succeed. The reason why Li Qingshan was so confident was because he had the 9 transformations of demons and gods. As his cultivation level increased, he was able to understand its wonders. Unlike ordinary cultivators, his path was not the only one that was unchanging. When others found it difficult to walk, or even when there was no path to walk, he only needed to change to another path. He did not have to worry about not having a path to walk, and he could always keep moving forward. Although the adventure in the pure land of ultimate bliss could be said to be extremely dangerous, it allowed the Qilin transformation to break through several layers. If it was just a closed-door meditation, who knew how many years it would take? It seemed like a coincidence, but it was actually because his path was just too wild. There was no place he could not go. Of course, if he did not possess a strong enough will, spirit, and courage, he would not be able to endure all these changes. In short, I am. Ah. Amidst the storm, the young man in the past had already become a demigod, but his youthful spirit became even more ostentatious. I wonder where that crazy woman Rongji is. He shaded his eyes and gazed into the distance. All he saw was the endless desert. The demon domain was boundless. If he wanted to find Qingqi Mountain, he needed someone to lead the way. Otherwise, if he accidentally ran into the hands of another demon god, probably no great sage would come to save him. The greatest lesson he had learnt from the battle against the Sangha god was that he was still not the opponent of any true god. If it were not for the Sangha god being cautious and unwilling to destroy the Nalanda temple, he would have been taken down already. He would have been done for. In the end, he still needed to have a clear understanding of the difference in strength. Will, spirit, and courage could all be converted into strength, but they could not directly replace it. As a result, he could only defeat Qiongqi through wits, not brute force. It would be best if he made his way to the foot of Qingqi Mountain silently and immediately fished out the mountain-moving tablet, toppling Qingqi Mountain in a single stroke. Then everything would be fine. He fished out a skull prayer bead in an attempt to contact Little An and help him determine Chen Rongji's location. However, after fiddling with it for a while, the skull prayer bead did not respond at all. It was probably because he was in the depths of the demon domain, and the demon domain was not within the 6 realms of Sasra, so the connection had been severed. However, he was not completely out of options. His eyes turned a deep blue, becoming as profound as the underworld. At that moment the storm stopped. The droplets of rain hovered in the air, forming a flat hexagon around Li Qingshan. With the completion of the spirit turtle transformation, he developed several more innate abilities, including abilities for divination and divination. The reason why he did not name them one by one was because these abilities had already begun to internalize, gradually becoming a form of instinct. They were like extensions of his limbs, and there were no longer any clear boundaries between them. Instead, they were all connected. The ingenuity of their usage depended on a single thought. For example, the divination he was performing right now basically used all of his innate abilities. It was like raising an arm required the brain to control it and the heart to transfuse blood. Even his legs would be affected. He basically had to use all of his organs. There was no point in giving it a domineering name like Green Mountain's Black Claw anymore. His head spun slowly like a radar, and the hexagon formed from the millions of droplets spun with it. His deep eyes rippled slightly, as if he could pierce through the endless space and grasp a thread of fate. Suddenly he locked onto a direction. I've got it. The storm continued to fall, and he had already vanished into the curtain of rain. The sky darkened very soon. The demon domain had always had short days and long nights. This was a city shrouded in haze. The streets crisscrossed like spider webs, and rectangular skyscrapers rose from the ground one after another, hidden in the depths of the gloomy clouds. It was impossible to tell how tall they were. It was like a gray forest. Cylindrical chimneys were scattered about, spitting out colorful smoke that was pungent like the breath of a monster. It merged with the haze and fell as rain. Looking up, the rain seemed to be black, landing on the neon lights that flickered at the corners of the streets. Li Qingshan blinked his eyes in surprise. For a moment he felt like he had returned to his past life. However, he immediately realized that all of this was the creation of mechanisms and magic, not some product of science and technology. The skyscrapers were just the most natural choice to accommodate as many people as possible. Moreover, these skyscrapers only had the same shape and color. They were extremely empty and monotonous, truly a concrete forest. If he stayed here for too long, it could basically drive any normal person crazy. He had already begun to miss the Elysium. There were gardens, plazas, and markets everywhere. Not long ago, that was the largest city he had ever seen in his life. Now, his understanding was refreshed. This gray city was not only larger, but it could accommodate more than 100 million people. Chapter 1590. Li Qingshan could not help but frown. He had known that crazy woman for many years, but he had never developed a shred of closeness or even familiarity with her. There was only deep disgust. He had always wanted to find an opportunity to kill her, but she had never given him a reason to do so. Instead, she had cooperated with him many times, lending him a hand at crucial moments. It was the same right now. He had to find her in this colossal demonic capital, even if the tremendous number of demon folk had muddled his fate. He could not help but slow down. Relying on his lingering sense of existence, he moved between the tall buildings. The streets were empty with very few pedestrians. They maintained their distance cautiously. Li Qingshan found this strange. In the past, demon folk had mostly been on the battlefield, but now they seemed no different from regular people. Even their demon chi had been assimilated by the demonic capital, so there was nothing special about them. He crushed a puddle of water as the rainbows swayed and splashed. He walked alone in the cold, rainy night. Suddenly he felt rather melancholic. He had not felt this way for many years already. He could not help but ponder it carefully. He thought back to the Elysium, the passionate square, and the revelers. It was so blissful that it was like a dream. Now that he had woken up from the dream, people walked alone. They were cold and wary of one another. The contrast was far too great. He could not help but prick up his ears, wanting to hear some sounds. He widened his eyes in an attempt to find something. As a result, he heard countless moans, curses, and sobs lurking in the depths of the forest. Every window had a tragedy. This damned place. Suddenly, he heard a woman's cries for help, as well as the cruel laughter and excited gasps of a few men nearby. He was rather impatient. Just now, it had only been a short while and he had already heard enough of this crap. It was enough to numb even the most righteous person, and he was not even some righteous person. However, he seemed to hear something again, so he made a few turns and stopped at the entrance of a dirty alleyway. In the depths of the alleyway, a few demon folk turned around. They all seemed very young. The oldest was only in his teens while the youngest seemed like a child. However, his face was filled with rudeness as he brandished a dagger. "Piss off. There's no place for you here." Li Qingshan did not move at all. He closed his eyes. Strangely, after taking a detour, he felt that he was getting closer to Chen Rongji. The demon folk were immediately completely infuriated. They surrounded him with a mess of weapons. "Blow up his head. I want to eat his liver." Li Qingshan opened his eyes and activated his earth force field. With a plop, a few demon folk collapsed from their own weight, reduced to a pile of minced meat. He stood still and closed his eyes again, continuing to search for new clues. In the depths of the alleyway, a woman walked out shakily. She was as young as the demon folk, pretty and petite. She was also just a young girl. She came in front of Li Qingshan, and with a rip sound she actually tore off all the torn clothes on her body and said flatteringly, "Sir, how do you want to play?" "I'm not playing." Li Qingshan felt a little helpless. The girl's expression changed. She turned around and fumbled for a few pieces of crushed silver from the pile of meat. She also took off her earrings and jewelry, knelt down and raised her hands, offering them to Li Qingshan. "Don't." Li Qingshan became even more impatient. The girl screamed and staggered backwards. "No, don't kill me. I beg you." "Why would I kill you?" Li Qingshan had no idea how to react. "Then why?" The girl was stunned. In her mind, since it was not for lust, nor was it for wealth, he could only be killing for fun. "Because I'm a good person." Li Qingshan shook his head. He sorted through the clues and continued on his way. The girl was stunned. Only after quite a while did she return to her senses. She chased after him out of the alleyway and asked loudly at his back, "What's your name?" "Lei Feng." Li Qingshan vanished into the night without even looking back. He felt slightly better for some reason. However, before long he saw the girl again. Beside her was a large group of people, all dressed in the same black uniform. Some wielded sticks of water and fire while others carried chains. Every single one of them was fierce-looking and harbored ill intentions. The girl pointed at Li Qingshan excitedly. "Sir Demon General, it's him. He's that Lei Feng. He didn't ask for any benefits, yet he still says he's a good person." Li Qingshan was stunned. His face darkened. This girl called the police. Or the city management. Who cares? Demon folk will always be demon folk. "Very bad little bitch. You've done a great service by reporting him. You'll be heavily rewarded. We won't let a good person go, nor will we wrongly accuse a bad person." The demon general sneered and waved his hand. "Take him down. This kid must be from the Ming cult." The ground was turned into mush, including the demon general. The girl screamed and collapsed on the ground. In her mind, the demon general was already an undefeatable expert, yet he ended up the same as those hooligans. Just what kind of monster was he? Li Qingshan walked over step by step. She collapsed on the ground again. She couldn't even beg for mercy. She could only close her eyes and wait for death. However, the footsteps passed by her. He said, "If there's a next time, I'll kill both of you." It was exactly because he heard the weak heartbeat that he chose to take action. Now he could not help but laugh at himself. He had only saved a vile spawn. The child of a demon folk was obviously still a demon folk. Compared to being born in a damned place like this, he was better off not being born. Though what the hell was the Ming cult? The girl was dumbfounded. She only returned to her senses after quite a while. She rubbed her slightly bulging belly with both hands. She had no idea what this man called Lei Feng was thinking at all. The child in her belly was the child of a demon general. It had taken her quite a lot of effort. It could be sold for a great price in the nursery. She resisted desperately because she was afraid of ruining this deal. Otherwise, playing around with those hooligans was nothing. Anyway, there must be some great scheme behind all this. Li Qingshan circled around the city a few times. He did not strike again, nor did he find Chen Rongji. Every time he felt like he was very close to her, he would suddenly miss. Her location was erratic, sometimes to the east, sometimes to the west. If she was not constantly moving, then some power was messing with fate, obscuring her location. He could not help but find this strange. He was a human immortal after all, and he possessed the perfect bloodline of a spirit turtle. Just how did this woman manage to do it? At this moment he felt an aura rapidly approach him. Raising his head, he saw a thin figure fly down from the top of the building. He carried a blade on his back and was masked in black clothes, with a ball of fire embroidered on his chest. He landed before him gently and silently, clasping his hands sternly. "May I ask for your name, sir?" Li Qingshan. A gleam of light flashed through the man's eyes. He became even more courteous. "Our cult master requests your presence." "The Ming cult?" Li Qingshan's expression was rather strange. "That's right." The man in black was filled with pride. He could not help but puff out his chest too. He pulled off his mask. "I am one of the 4 great guardian kings of the Ming cult, the Green-Winged Bat King. I've come to invite you under the cult master's orders, sir." The corner of Li Qingshan's eye twitched. He confirmed some of his guesses. That damned woman was actually bold enough to plagiarize his novel. Yep, even though he had copied it. And the Green-Winged Bat King before him did not seem like a demon folk at all. His expression was also very sunken, but he did not give off any perverse or evil aura. Instead, he gave off a heroic and stirring aura. How strange. It was strange no matter how he thought about it. Had that crazy woman changed? No, that was impossible. "You're the cult master?" The Radiant King. Chapter 1591. The Radiant King? Li Qingshan found it utterly absurd. If that crazy woman could be called the Radiant King, then shouldn't he be calling himself the Buddha? He could not help but mock her slightly. The Green-Winged Bat King gazed at the sky. The rain continued to patter down. There was not even a single star. There was no light at all. Even if it was sunny and daytime in the demon domain, there was only a single black sun. "Sir, I know you look down on us despicable demon folk, but there are countless loyal and righteous demon folk too. The cult master once said to us, 'Light is in everyone's hearts.' You are the light of the demon domain. Even if we all die in battle, there will be thousands of people who will stand forward and fight against evil." Li Qingshan was taken aback. He had spoken from the bottom of his heart. He was completely sincere. Let alone the demon domain, there were not many people like him even in the regular world. He patted his shoulder. "Well done. Take me to see your cult master. Chen Rongji, I'd like to see what you're up to." "Yes, sir." The Green-Winged Bat King unfurled his cloak and took off into the air. He passed through the rainy night like a bat and flew towards the edge of the city. The gurgling of water was deafening. The sewage from the city formed a great waterfall, pouring into a great swamp and giving off a pungent smell. The Green-Winged Bat King nodded at Li Qingshan behind him before leaping into the waterfall. Li Qingshan followed closely behind. In that moment, a huge black shadow rushed over. The ear-piercing shriek made the air tremble, completely drowning out the rumbling of the waterfall. "Bats." As it turned out, the black shadow was countless large bats. He raised an eyebrow and was about to clean them up casually. "Sir, please don't harm them. They're natural sentry posts. Sai, they were demon folk in the first place. They couldn't survive above, so they were reduced to the sewers and fed on trash. They gradually demonified. Perhaps it was because he had been named the Green-Winged Bat King, but he developed a special feeling towards these demonified bats. However, the deterrent aura he gave off prevented the bats from attacking. They circled around in the surroundings madly. Li Qingshan also noticed that the bodies of these bats still retained human characteristics. There were males and females, old and young, but their faces were ferocious and inhuman. But compared to this, the gaze of the Green-Winged Bat King that was filled with sympathy surprised him even more. After passing through the dense mass of bats, the scene before his eyes suddenly became clear, and a wide and deep passageway appeared before his eyes. It caused him to recall the complicated underground caves in Azure County all those years ago. However, everything here was man-made. Huge stones were piled up seamlessly, and the dome was over 100 feet high. If one did not consider good and evil, beauty and ugliness, this demonic city was truly magnificent and extraordinary. It was more spectacular than any city he had ever seen. After entering the underground passageway, the green-winged Bat King also relaxed a lot. As he led the way, he introduced, "My lord, although this is the Taotai realm, all the devil cities in the devil domain were built by the disciples and grand disciples of the devil god Jia. They are most proficient in building machinery. When we build the sewers, we'll use the earth and stone we excavate to build skyscrapers. The cult master has said that we demon folk are actually very clever and hardworking. We've just been brainwashed and used, blinding our true selves." "Yeah, that makes sense." Li Qingshan nodded, but he thought inside, "Aren't your true selves demon hearts? You seem more like you've been brainwashed and used like this. Your cult master must have ulterior motives. He'll sell you out at any moment. There must be some great scheme behind all of this." "You said this is the Taotai realm, which is also the territory of the Taotai demon god. It's been nice of you not to be suppressed here." Right now he maintained his vigilance against all demon gods. Let alone demon gods themselves, even evil gods were difficult to deal with. He felt more and more like there was a scheme here. Qian Rongji was only a demon king. How was she supposed to oppose him? "Thank you for your concern, my lord. This place has been extended and expanded countless times over the past tens of millions of years. It's been abandoned and collapsed, so the terrain is complicated. It's completely become a maze. And the power of the chaotic demon god permeates this place. Without anyone to lead the way, even demon kings will lose their way and be trapped here in the end. If those pieces of trash on the ground want to find us, they'll have to tear down the entire demonic city and dig up everything within a range of 50 kilometers. Li Qingshan immediately understood what the power that was interfering with his divination was. And the deeper they went into this maze, the stronger the power became. But there were still loopholes. "What will happen if one of you is captured? For example, you?" The green-winged Bat King said calmly, "I'll immediately destroy my own demon heart. And actually, we don't know the exact location of the main altar." The passage ahead suddenly stopped. It was a collapsed, abandoned dead end. However, on the vast waterway stood a vermilion door. The paint was mottled and the nails on the door were rusted. A golden sun was painted in the center, but it had also been eroded by the passage of time. Apart from the stone lions on both sides of the door, there was nothing else in the surroundings. It was just a lonely door. "My lord, we've arrived." The green-winged Bat King stood in front of the door. The eyes of the two stone lions suddenly turned and stared at them. With a creak, the vermilion door slowly opened. Li Qingshan looked inside and saw a chaotic whirlpool. Interesting. Li Qingshan was a step ahead. He stepped over the high threshold and stepped into a shrine. Everything was immersed in the tranquil darkness. The candles burned silently, blooming with light. Pairs of eyes looked over from the darkness. There was only vigilance but no malice. When the green-winged Bat King appeared, the candles surrounded him. An old man with a walking stick asked, "Bat King, is this the guest that cult leader invited?" "Yes, where is cult leader?" "He's teaching the children in the shrine." A child tugged at the corner of the green-winged Bat King's clothes. "Uncle Greenwing, is it still raining outside? What's it like when it rains?" "You'll know when you grow up." The green-winged Bat King smiled and rubbed the child's head. He was about to speak to Li Qingshan when he discovered that Li Qingshan's figure had already disappeared. After entering this shrine, Li Qingshan immediately grasped the trajectory of fate and determined the location of Qian Rongji. In the shrine, millions of candles flickered and were reflected in the eyes of the children. A figure sat in the warm candlelight and was lecturing, "You are all brothers and sisters. You must love each other." That voice was faintly discernible as if it came from a faraway place. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman, young or old. However, there was a strange magic that directly poured into the hearts of the children. "Cult leader, my heart feels terrible." A child pressed his chest. His devil heart was beating violently as if it was about to be torn apart. Two kinds of thoughts were fiercely clashing in his heart. But when a hand grasped his hand, the pain was gone, and it became very warm. "You have to endure it, understand?" "I understand. Today's lesson ends here. You can all leave. My guest is here." Li Qingshan stepped into the shrine and looked coldly at the cult leader. His gaze pierced through the veil and discovered that there was still a layer of chaos behind it. It was almost impossible to see her true appearance. His eyes focused and a mysterious light suddenly appeared. Just now he had completely seen through her. Chen Rongji, what the hell are you doing? Is it just you? Chen Rongji seemed a little disappointed. Alright, I welcome you. Cut the crap. Bring me to Qingxi Mountain immediately. The realms are not directly connected. Right now we are in the Taotai realm. If we want to go to the Qiongqi realm, we have to go through a gate just like the Vermilion Gate that you came through. We can't go through without a customs document. Give me a deadline. I'm in a hurry. 1 month. Chen Rongji raised a finger. When have I ever disappointed you? If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it to where I am today. Perhaps I would have died already. Conspiracies always required strength to coordinate, or else there would be a backlash. She was very distressed now. Even if she had demon god Qiongqi as her prey, she wouldn't be in such a difficult situation. The prey this time was this ferocious tiger in front of her. She wanted to carry out the will of the demon domain and make this chosen man swallow the Black Sun demon heart and become the king of the demon gods. How could he bite him fiercely without being torn apart by his rage? After all, she still wanted to live to see how this world was destroyed. She couldn't help but lick her scarlet lips, yearning for destruction and death. Li Qingshan frowned, instinctively feeling a trace of danger. He wanted to have a clearer premonition, but was immediately swallowed by the chaotic vortex that wrapped around her body. He simply asked directly, "What is your goal?" He released a trace of killing intent. "You should know that I hate being schemed against." Chen Rongji suddenly stood up and asked excitedly, "What do you think of this place?" Without waiting for Li Qingshan to answer, she continued, "What's interesting is that every world has many other worldlings." With another wave of her sleeve, all the candles were extinguished. "In the darkness," she said mysteriously, "they should have been extinguished like these candles, assimilated by the darkness and fused into one. I was the one who found them and lit them up so that they could light up more people." What? Li Qingshan couldn't understand. There was no benefit to her doing this. Not only would she be rejected by the will of the demon territory, but she would also be rejected by the will of the demon territory. If things got out of hand, the evil gods and even the devil gods wouldn't let her off. They would definitely kill her. If a person was born in darkness, he wouldn't find the darkness unbearable, until one day he saw the light. Li Qingshan's heart trembled as he recalled the tragic expression on the face of the green-winged Bat King. The demon domain is like a dark dungeon. There are no windows, nor can they be broken through. The demon folk slumber here from birth to death, muddle-headed. They are suffocated to death generation after generation. This is just too lucky. Chen Rongji said sternly. Her face gradually twisted, filled with jealousy and resentment. Suddenly she smiled strangely. She was jealous that these demon folk could be born in the demon domain. She resented that they could not feel the pain she felt. If they had been sold off as soon as they were born, they would not have been betrayed by their birth parents. If everyone was betrayed, then it would not matter. This was unfair. With a violent wave of her hand, she lit up all the candles again. They burned fiercely, casting a wild, twisting snake shadow on the wall. These damn demon folk. If we don't wake them up, how can they taste despair? You madman. She giggled. They're destined to be ostracized and hunted down. They'll witness all the evil in the world and hate their identities as demon folk. Their hearts will be filled with pain and struggle, and they'll die in despair in the end. Because I said to them, there's hope for everything. Justice has finally triumphed over evil. Spurt. Ah. Sai, you have no idea just how strange the demon realm is. Even if I tortured those stupid children earlier to death one by one, I wouldn't gain much from it. But now, as long as I keep them alive, they'll receive endless blessings every single day. If this continues, it'll only be a matter of time before they become evil gods. Li Qingshan completely understood now. The entire Ming cult and all the followers were living sacrifices she offered to the demon realm. These demon folk who still had a conscience would definitely endure pain even greater than death because of their conscience. Regular demon folk would never be able to come up with such a vicious idea even if they racked their brains. It was chilling, but it allowed her to perfectly match the twisted will of the demon domain. Her fury surged. She squeezed out a sentence from between her teeth. Aren't you afraid I'll slaughter you? Chapter 1593. Reeks, Qian Rongji's words were like a poisonous blade, pressuring him forcefully. Li Qingshan was immediately stumped. So-called normal demon folk were all cruel and violent, committing all sorts of crimes. If he ran into them, he would slaughter them in a single stroke. However, if he ignored them, Qian Rongji would clearly be torturing these people with great malice, making a mad mockery of their so-called conscience, justice, and hope. It was a complete dilemma. At the end of the day, the demon domain was not a normal world at all. He closed his eyes and opened them again. Is this your objective? What's your objective? Qian Rongji smiled. Do you think I care whether these demon folk are in pain or happiness? Perhaps. Perhaps the darkness will never recede. Perhaps hope is just an illusion, but as long as someone stands up against it, it's not like there's absolutely no hope. You might as well say that despair is the true illusion. At this moment, the scorching candles had already burnt out. Darkness surged over like the tide. However, Li Qingshan's eyes flickered in the darkness. Who says the darkness is invincible? A fraction of heat produces a fraction of light. Even if it's like a firefly, it can illuminate some of the darkness. There's no need to wait for the sun. Along the way, had he never suffered pain or experienced despair? Did he really not doubt whether he could reach beyond the 9 heavens at all? Actually, it did not matter even if he could not reach it. That was just a star that pointed the way. The path was not in the sky but beneath his feet. As long as he advanced, even if it was just a single extra step, it would be fine. Even if he suffered countless setbacks and was beaten back to his original state, as long as he still had a sliver of strength left, he would continue forward. That was unless he died on the battlefield, but there was even less of a need for despair. You might as well say that was his life's wish. Yu won. Sincerity was both courageous and forceful. In the end, he was unyielding and unconquerable. An unyielding, resolute aura surged out of the sacred hall, filling the entire divine hall. All of the demon folk felt a strange sense of excitement. Qian Rongji had retreated too. Even the venomous snake could not block the path of the king of beasts. This confirmed once again that this was the charm of a tiger. Li Qingshan turned around and left the holy hall. You've awakened them. That's good. I'll help you as well. But don't forget 1 month. Qian Rongji stood quietly in the darkness, pondering and smiling faintly. Li Qingshan paced around the divine hall alone. He had his own path to walk. It was impossible for him to stay here and help these demon folk cause a revolution. It was just like how Brother Nyo had never taken care of him all this time. If he wanted to do something, he should work hard and sacrifice himself. How could he rely on the light of others? However, just like Brother Nyo, he could teach them a set of techniques. Not only did this cultivation technique need to be powerful, but it also needed to be able to adapt to the environment of the demon domain. With the major accomplishment of the spirit turtle transformation, he completely possessed that ability. His eyes were deep and unfathomable, occasionally revealing a wisp of profound light. Several days later, in the main hall of the divine hall, dang 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 dang, the bell rang urgently. All the demon folk hurried over, men and women, young and old. Just like what Qian Rongji had said, their faces were filled with undisguisable pain and despair. After all, there were still very few who could turn pain and despair into heroism and solemnity like the green-winged Bat King. They still had to endure the pain and struggle. Who are you? How dare you ring the bell? A demon king with disheveled hair and a booming voice bellowed furiously. Brother Lion King, he's the guest that the cult master has invited, Li Qingshan, Sir Li. The green-winged Bat King stepped forward in a hurry to mediate. Please forgive me, sir. This brother of mine has the most violent temper. As soon as the golden-haired Lion King heard the 2 words, cult master, he immediately fell silent. However, he still refused to accept Li Qingshan's gaze. Since he was a guest, it was all the more reason for him to abide by the rules. Li Qingshan said, I'll teach you a set of cultivation methods right now. This cultivation method is called... He paused, 9 Yang Divine Art. Ignoring the demon folk's reactions, he recited it word by word. In the beginning, the golden-haired Lion King did not take it to heart, but his expression gradually changed. Every single word seemed to be branded into his heart. Not only did it contain words, but it also contained images, thoughts, and comprehension. Every single bit of information was extremely intricate, completely natural. It left him intoxicated. Li Qingshan powered his great freedom soul and used the Empyrean demon mystical arts to pass his thoughts to the golden-haired Lion King, enlightening him. Even a child who did not know anything at all could remember it clearly. All he needed to do was constantly comprehend it in his future cultivation. As for the 9 Yang Divine Art, although the name was still copied, the content was definitely original. He used the demon suppression statuary and the war demon statuary as a logical starting point before combining it with the arts of the boundless ocean, the extreme monarch's record of world destruction, the heavenly tome of freedom, and the thousands of cultivation methods he had read through in the heavens. After refining, summarizing, and deriving, he created a brand new cultivation method. He was the same as the spirit sovereign Guihai, possessing a perfect spirit turtle bloodline and a sixth heavenly tribulation. He had also read through all the books in the heavens. He could naturally do what spirit venerable Guihai could do. On top of that, he also possessed the 9 transformations of demons and gods, a peerless cultivation technique that stood above the 9 heavens. When he created this 9-yang divine art, he incorporated the tiger demon spirit of battling the heavens and earth. In this way he would not be rejected by the will of the demon domain. However, this wasn't about compromising. As long as they carried out this spirit, they would definitely not succumb to any authority, regardless if it was the demonic god or the demonic sky. Therefore, he wasn't afraid that this set of cultivation method would be leaked. Instead, he hoped that it would spread as far as possible. Even though they couldn't change the world, they were like candlelight that could illuminate the darkness. He didn't want to transform them into good people, but to forge them into warriors. Although the cultivation technique he created could not surpass his own realm, just like the heavenly tome of all, he could only cultivate it to the peak of the 5th heavenly tribulation. Whether or not he could transcend the 6th heavenly tribulation would depend on his own aptitude and luck. EU3, however, to the demon folk, it was like a welcome rain. It was extremely precious. Even in the human realm, it was almost impossible for an ordinary person to obtain a scroll of the heavenly book. In this cruel demon domain where the strong preyed on the weak, countless people would be willing to sacrifice everything in exchange for a low-level cultivation method, but they might not necessarily be able to obtain it. They even suspected whether there was some kind of scheme going on here, which immediately made them feel ashamed of the thoughts of these inferior demon folk. The golden-haired Lion King and the green-winged Bat King understood the significance of this cultivation method the best. Both of them were overcome with emotion, unable to control themselves. Suddenly they dropped to their knees at the same time, accepting the cultivation method. With a rustle, all the demon folk dropped to their knees as well, as if Li Qingshan was the cult leader of the Ming cult. Qian Rongji watched this from the darkness and thought, "You can't help but care, nor do you want to care. This is where your charm lies as well as your greatest weakness." Li Qingshan, however, gained a different understanding. Brother Ox had passed on his cultivation method yesterday, and today he was passing it on to someone else. The torch of embers was passed on endlessly. The miniature world revolved rapidly. Vegetation grew madly and life flourished. Boom. A new power erupted, filling his limbs and bones. The Qilin transformation had actually broken through once again, reaching the 6th layer. Hold on, what's going on? Li Qingshan's eyes widened. He found this unbelievable. Since when did the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine become so easy to break through? If he was in the Elysium, then so be it. After all, he was transformed from the Qilin paradise, and the cultivation of the Qilin transformation was not particularly high either. However, this was the demon domain. The Qilin was a divine transformation after all. It was already impressive enough that it was not suppressed. Chapter 1594. After Li Qingshan finished imparting the cultivation method, he fell into deep thought. Internet. The various transformations of the 9 transformations of demons and gods were easy at the beginning, but the further one progressed, the more difficult it became. Even the devil transformations of the tiger demon and the ape demon, which suited his temperament, were far from complete. After all, no matter how compatible one's temperament was, it was only a part of cultivation. The accumulation of external resources and internal spiritual comprehension were both indispensable. Even in terms of temperament, the Qilin transformation was the one he was least compatible with. It was the most difficult transformation to cultivate, and it was very difficult from the very beginning. Breaking through to the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd levels was already a lot of hard work. Back then, the ox demon and tiger demon had been so relaxed. Furthermore, his current comprehension and resources were many times greater than back then. Therefore, he was prepared to fight a protracted war. It was not until he accidentally entered the Elysium that he began to advance by leaps and bounds. This was obviously due to the Qilin paradise. It was just like how Ruin's end was to the spirit turtle. Its influence on a world was extremely great. As a matter of fact, it could even be said that the environment determined people. After all, no matter how strong an individual was, compared to the energy of the entire environment, it was just a drop in the ocean. If it was a world with a particularly strong will, it would directly determine the way everyone lived. If a person was born in the Azura realm and was unwilling to fight with others, no matter how much of a genius he was, he would still be killed, or he wouldn't be considered a genius at all. Chen Rongji, that woman, could barely be considered average in the world of the 9 prefectures. However, in the demonic domain she might be a rare peerless genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years. As long as she did not die, she would definitely become an evil god. Moreover, because he controlled the will of the 5 planes, the people he met in the 9 provinces in the past all improved like gods, such as Yu Zijian, Ru Xan, and Han Xiongji. He didn't even need to deliberately take care of her. His emotional inclination could affect everything. If he had not made a trip to the ruin of End, he would never have been able to master his spirit turtle manifestation. Not only did Ruin's End influence his temperament, adjusting him to a state most suited for the spirit turtle transformation, but it also provided him with an endless supply of resources. Although the price was all his memories and almost all his other transformations were destroyed, it was all worth it. The further he went, the more difficult it became and the greater the power it brought him. That was how he established his current realm. Moreover, it wasn't just temperament and resources but also luck. Luck was illusory but it was real. If an ordinary person received help from a noble person, his life would naturally be smooth sailing. But what if he received the care and help of the entire world? Chen Rongji and Hui Long fought, and when Hui Long was about to escape from the infernal domain, he bumped into Li Qingshan. This was definitely not a coincidence. Take the Ming cult as an example. If the other demon emperors came up with the same idea, they would not dare to cause trouble. Otherwise they would have been found out and skinned. However, even Li Qingshan was unable to divine her fate. Compared to regular demon folk, this was basically cheating. He did not need to bear the responsibilities of the demon emperor, but he received benefits far greater than the demon emperor. The Black Sun demon heart was restless. What Li Qingshan had obtained was far more than just cheating. It was simply, the world has already decided that you shall be the demon god king. He should have recited a poem right away. Living or dying for the benefit of the country, how can I avoid it because of misfortune or fortune? However, when he thought about it, he really didn't want to. He was a good chivalrous king. How could he come to the infernal region? But why? Why did the infernal region choose me? In the beginning, he thought it was because of the various demon transformations and the demonic nature in his heart that he had obtained the favor of the demon heavens. Now he felt things were not that simple. With a thought, he raised his eyebrows and a vertical eye suddenly opened on his forehead, peering into the laws of the world. However, he could not help but leak out a sliver of his aura. The green-winged Bat King and the golden-haired Lion King had just stood up, but they almost collapsed again. They looked at each other in shock. Evil god. Demon kings like them could already be considered powerful in the infernal domain. There were actually extremely few demon emperors and demon emperors. This demonic city had a population of over 100 million, but there were only a dozen or so demon emperors, 1 in 10 million. There were slightly more demon emperors but there was only 1 in a million. As for evil gods, they were unreachable existences. Demon emperors and demon emperors were powerful, but they would still die in battle. Evil gods were already the darlings of the infernal domain. They would not die for no reason. They were the central force of the entire infernal domain. The one who ruled this demonic city was an evil god. The green-winged Bat King was in disbelief. He murmured to himself, the cult master is a guest. He's actually an evil god. The golden-haired Lion King's eyes lit up. No, he should be called a human immortal. If he's not an exalted immortal, how can he create a cultivation method like this? Yes, a human immortal. The green-winged Bat King nodded. Thinking back to just now, he was actually bold enough to speak so boldly before a human immortal, expressing his displeasure over his mockery. He could not help but sweat profusely. If it were an evil god, he would definitely torture him to the point where he wished he was dead. However, not only did this sir not scold him, but he even encouraged him, treating him as an equal the entire time. It was simply unbelievable. Thinking about it, was this not exactly what he yearned for? Generosity, integrity, equality, and light. The golden-haired Lion King sighed. The cult master has actually managed to invite the assistance of an exalted immortal, and he's even passed on such a cultivation method. Our Ming cult has great hope. Yes, great hope. Hearing that, the eyes of all the demon folk lit up with hope. They raised their heads and looked at Li Qingshan. They felt that with this sir leading them, it was not impossible for them to overthrow the tyranny of the evil god that ruled over this demonic city. As for the 12 demon gods, they completely dared not think about it. However, unbeknownst to them, Li Qingshan's target this time was a demon god. Along the way he had never looked back. Before they knew it, he had already traveled so high and so far. Perhaps it was exactly because of this that they did not realize they had already surpassed all life a long time ago, joining the ranks of immortals. Perhaps they had clearly realized it, but they just had to smash the statue of the divine General Samarin, refusing to be worshipped and worshipped by anyone. As a result, these demon folk were destined to be disappointed. His objective this time was not to save demon folk with a conscience like them, but to remove the blood oath of the Nether River. That was only related to himself. He could draw his blade and lend a hand when he saw injustice, but he could forget about saving people from suffering and delivering them from suffering. He had not come to the demon domain to be a savior. The Qilin tiger took pity on the common people. However, he did not know what pity was. He did not pity himself, nor did he pity others. This was also the cruelty of a tiger. However, many years ago, the young man had once shed tears for a homeless child. The child was called Little Anne. That was the only exception. Li Qingshan scanned around a few times with his eyes and saw through the workings of the laws of the demon domain, but he was still confused. The laws of the world were too vast and too complicated. His method was like a blind man groping an elephant. He could not grasp its essence at all. Then there was only one last method left. With a shake of his body, he turned into the Qilin divine beast. His 4 hooves soared into the air, his antlers and mane danced, and his scales were thick. In the next moment he suddenly widened his eyes. How is this possible? Immediately, surging demon chi gathered towards him. The laws of the world twisted because of him. The will of the demon domain that had always been filled with malice actually welcomed him like a mother welcoming a wandering child. In Chen Rongji's senses, the will of the demon domain gathered on him like the descent of the demonic heavens. No, he was not some child of destiny. He was the ruler of destiny. However, Li Qingshan felt no joy at all. His scales were dyed black by the demon chi, and the azure Qilin turned into a black Qilin. He had black horns, black hooves, black mane and black scales. His eyes that were as gentle as a deer became cold and cruel too. The world is heartless. Everything is worthless. This had once been the slogan that millions of demon folk had chanted outside Black Cloud City. The black Qilin seemed to be the embodiment of this phrase. Originally, Li Qingshan felt no pity for these demon folk, but he did sympathize with them. Now, even this sympathy had vanished. His cold gaze swept past them like he was looking at inanimate objects. He sucked in a gentle breath. The demon folk in the divine hall, whether male or female, old or young, strong or weak, all collapsed to the ground like wooden stakes. They were dead. Only Chen Rongji could still put up a fight, so the black Qilin strode forward. He planted his foot deeply into the ground with each step, as if he wanted to stomp everything to pieces. The divine hall shook violently. The crisscrossing underground tunnels fractured and collapsed on a large scale. The entire demonic capital shook. All of the demon folk could sense it. They could not help but tremble in fear. The more powerful an existence was, the more they could sense this terror. This was no longer a benevolent divine beast. It was clearly a monster of the utmost viciousness and evil. To be continued. Chapter 1595. Flying over the gray buildings in the very depths of the city's forest, the great evil god who ruled over the demonic city suddenly stood up. He stared at the trembling ground beneath his feet with a frown. The demonic city had been suppressed by the formation. It had never experienced such an obvious earthquake before. Something must have happened underground. Was it the rats from the underground trenches? How was that possible? It was impossible for them to possess this kind of power, and even he felt some sort of threat. Looks like I can't let this go on any longer. The ingredients have already been fattened up enough. It's time to serve them, humph. The black Qilin forced Chen Rongji into a corner and lowered its head to sniff her scent. Chen Rongji tottered about like she was drunk. Her life force rapidly left her, but there was no fear on her face at all. Instead, she gazed at the black Qilin in a daze. Interesting, hiss. As it smiled, its bright red lips suddenly split into a huge, gaping mouth, turning into a huge, colorful snake. It bit down on the black Qilin's neck, and 4 sharp teeth pierced the black scales, injecting all of its bitter venom into the black Qilin. The black Qilin let out a roar. It was in great pain, shaking its head violently. The black Qilin and the snake engaged in a desperate battle. Boom, boom, boom. Several pillars were smashed apart, and the divine hall almost collapsed. The black Qilin's front right hoof suddenly stomped down on the snake's back. Blood spurted out and it was cut in half. With a hiss, the snake's blood landed on the ground, kicking up a poisonous mist. When it landed on the black Qilin, it slid off like water, completely unaffected. Half of the snake's body hung off the black Qilin. Its life force rapidly declined, but it still refused to let go. The black Qilin opened its mouth filled with sharp teeth and bit down on the snake by 7 inches, about to rip it to pieces. A hint of struggle gradually appeared in its pitch-black eyes. The pain made it furious, but it also roused its original consciousness. As if it had woken up from a nightmare, it looked around and produced 2 long breaths from its nostrils. The dead demon folk all moaned, opening their eyes again. They had no idea what had happened. The snake used this opportunity to reattach its 2 halves, turning back into human form and curling up in a dark corner. Its face was as pale as snow, but it continued to smile at the black Qilin. The black Qilin let out a low growl of anger and shed all the scales on its body. Its eyes were still pitch black like the night, without any white in them. He knelt on one knee and suddenly pressed his hand against his chest, powering the spirit turtle transformation to suppress the rampaging Qilin. Only then did his eyes gradually return to normal. They were clear and filled with shock. The earthquake in Shanghai gradually subsided. Sect Master. The 2 law kings stared at her face in astonishment, as if this was the first time they had seen her. Qian Rongji waved her hand tiredly. All of you leave. Yes, sir. The demon folk dared not disobey, so they all backed away. Are you all right? Qian Rongji said softly, being bitten by a bitter snake is very painful. At the same time, she licked her pale lips as if she was recalling the taste of that bite. Bitter snake. Li Qingshan touched his neck. There were still 4 red marks on it. That kind of pain was even worse than the tortures of hell, causing him to feel a lingering fear. However, it was also fortunate that he was able to wake him up in time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. The demon domain also wanted to assimilate him. The path of suffering is the 4 truths of Buddhism. Little N was the one who taught me, Qian Rongji explained with a smile. Then she asked curiously, what was that about earlier? Li Qingshan frowned and pointed at the door. It's none of your business. You can leave too. All right, I'll order people to lock down this place so that no one can disturb you. I'll come find you after I've dealt with the customs documents. Qian Rongji left with light footsteps. She seemed to be in a very good mood. She even hummed a tune as if she had become a different person. In the blink of an eye, only Li Qingshan remained in the empty hall. He spun around in confusion before plopping down on the steps. How is this possible? No, this is it. Only then does it make sense. In an instant, everything was connected. In the Elysium, on that wild night when demonic beasts ran amok, the demon blood that evaporated under the sunlight. In front of the Mahavira hall, the blooming lotus flowers, and Abbot Yangon's questioning and crying. What's the use of the Nalanda temple? What's the use of the Elysium? Why don't we just destroy it? Why was he so sad? He didn't understand at first. Even if the Elysium was formed from the Qilin paradise, it was nothing more than a demonstration of Buddha's great compassion and power. He should be proud. But now he understood everything. This demon domain is also formed from the Qilin paradise. This was simply challenging common sense. The difference between the Elysium and the demon domain was too great. One was a pure land and the other was a filthy land. However, the truth was right before his eyes. After he transformed into a Qilin, the Elysium and the demon domain would respond to him strongly. Although the methods were different, there was no difference in essence. Meanwhile, the black sun demon heart was the same as the lotus flowers. They were both materialized from the laws of heaven and earth. It was just that the nature of the two was completely opposite. It was as if someone had cut the 4 seasons in half. Spring and summer returned to the Elysium, while autumn and winter returned to the filthy land of the demon domain. If I'm not wrong, this is probably the work of Buddha. In the Elysium, there would always be a bountiful harvest of fruits and endless food. People naturally didn't need to work hard, and they didn't have any desire to fight. However, this wasn't enough. If the population couldn't be controlled, no matter how bountiful the world was, it would eventually fall into disputes. Firstly, not everyone could enter the Elysium. Secondly, people didn't have any desires in their hearts, which ensured that their quality of life wouldn't decline. Thinking about food and clothing was human nature. The residents of the Elysium weren't cultivators with great determination and wisdom. Most of them were good people who accumulated virtue and did good deeds. Where did their desires go? At first, Li Qingshan thought that Buddha had influenced the world with the power of wishes and even brainwashed everyone. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be a matter of desires. Good people would also have greed and jealousy, and even good people would fall. They wouldn't never retreat. Just having enough food and clothing couldn't create such a Elysium. Now he knew that things weren't that simple. Even if the original Qilin paradise was bountiful, it shouldn't be this bountiful. Even if there were barren, desolate lands, it shouldn't be as barren as the demon domain. The Buddhist ancestor extracted the laws of heaven and earth he needed and constructed the entire pure land of ultimate bliss. Not only did he split the Qilin paradise into two, they were still interconnected and affected each other. All desires and evil thoughts would sink into this demonic domain. The bountiful Elysium just happened to be sparsely populated, while the barren, filthy land was driven by demon folk to reproduce madly. When they couldn't feed them, they would send them out one by one to invade and devour other worlds. It was no wonder that the demon domain could continue to exist. It wasn't because the gods and Buddhas were incapable of destroying the demon domain, but because this had always been a part of the design. Establishing a world, using the environment to influence people, using the laws to shape people, not using abilities and powers to control people. Such a wondrous concept, such a grand power, made the great demon capital that could accommodate over 100 million demon folk seem as childish as a pile of sand sculptures made by children. Li Qingshan could understand the Yangon abbot's feelings. He watched over the Pure Land Temple in Black Cloud City and watched countless soldiers fall in battle against demon folk. Who knew how many demon folk had died under the staff of the Buddhist monk? But in the end, he discovered that the source of everything was the Elysium that he had been longing for. It was unavoidable for his faith to collapse and his mind to fall into chaos. Most importantly, the demon domain could not be destroyed. Demon folk could not be converted. This basically negated the Pure Land sect's belief in delivering all life from suffering. It was no wonder that the White Bone Bodhisattva had unleashed the Samadhi flames of White Bone. Chapter 1596. Li Qingshan sat on the high stone steps, supporting his head with his fist and one hand on his knee. He frowned and fell into deep thought. Yin and yang, good and evil, Buddha and demon. All kinds of things, all kinds of colors. Inadvertently, he revealed a solemn appearance like a god in a temple. This dark divine hall was his Taoist field, surrounded by a deep and quiet atmosphere. Calm and unmoving like the earth, quiet and deep like a secret. If a mortal accidentally broke in, the first reaction would be to worship and then pray. Whether he was willing to accept it or not, he was already a god. Whether it was evil god, human immortal, or divine general of Sangharama, it was just a title. Although he was not a real immortal, he was only one step away. He took out the black sun demon heart, which floated quietly in his palm, glowing with a dark light. He understood all this. Instead of saying it was the black sun demon heart, it was more like the heart of Kailan, a sacred heart. This heart no longer released any breath and was completely under his control. Even the demon god could not control its existence. It became something that belonged to him alone, and it deeply tempted him. Come, my beloved son, I have waited for a long time to become a ruler. A faint call came from the depths of the darkness. It was the eternal thought of the primeval Kailan, and its essence was the fluctuation of the invisible law. Through his primordial spirit, it was translated into vague and intermittent sentences, asking him to swallow the black sun demon heart and bear this mission. To restore the natural order. The natural order? Li Qingshan murmured to himself, smelling blood and killing, which made him shudder. He remembered a dream from a long time ago. He dreamed that he was the enemy of millions of people, killing until the sun was covered by mountains of corpses, and the stars sank in the sea of blood. At that time he was just a young man in the mountains and did not know any martial arts. Relying on his drunken anger, he killed the first person in his life, and opened a path of killing, a path to the 9 heavens. That was the starting point of everything. Now he seemed to have returned to the beginning before he killed people, and once again stood in front of the starting point, afraid and at a loss. However, this time there was no brother bull to guide him. Was it because he did not have enough power? Or did he need more powerful magic and magic treasures? No, it was not. He wanted power? Simple. As long as he swallowed this black sun demon heart, how difficult would it be to become a true god? The crux of the matter was not only the black sun demon heart, but also the lotus pond in front of the great strength hall of Nanduo Temple. Every lotus flower was materialized from the laws extracted from the Qilin paradise. The laws immediately fluctuated slightly and confirmed his guess. That was the imprint hidden in the deepest part of the world's memory. However, if the primeval spirit turtle wanted to seek fortune and avoid calamity, and wanted to stand on the side of the victors, then what was the primeval Qilin's purpose? Originally, its path should not have taken part in any battles. Perhaps it was also for the sake of protecting the order of nature. After all, creating humans was truly the greatest destroyer of the order of nature. In the end, it was slain by Nuwa just like the primeval spirit turtle. The will of the world obviously could not answer such a complicated question unless it became the master of the world and delved into the world's memory to take a look. Li Qingshan thought of something and spread his fingers again. The demon heart of Black Sun hovered up again. He was not the master of the world yet, but he possessed a key, so he opened the eye on his forehead and stared at the demon heart of Black Sun. In that moment, the demon heart of Black Sun erupted with the most resplendent light. All of its consciousness was sucked in. The domain of light is you. The person in your heart is always in light. Suddenly he heard Chen Rongji's voice ring out from behind, saying impatiently, "I'm not telling you to." Halfway through, he stopped abruptly, replaced by surprise. Chen Rongji seemed to be unable to see him. She was currently lecturing the demon folk below the steps, but her words were all jumbled up and confusing. The demon folk seemed to have appeared out of thin air too. Their gazes all passed through him, gazing at the radiant king on the platform in reverence. He immediately understood that he had already entered the world's memory. Everything was like a movie being replayed rapidly. The demon folk below the platform dispersed and gathered again, all walking backwards. People moved to and fro in the divine hall, leaving behind a string of blurs. He saw how the divine hall had been built, and he also saw how the crisscrossing sewers shrank inch by inch under the efforts of countless demon folk. He saw the skyscrapers rapidly descend, and the demonic city was reduced to flat ground. He even saw how the demonic beasts became demon folk and how adults became children. The clouds and smoke changed as the sun and moon moved rapidly through the air. A huge, golden hand suddenly appeared and vanished again, leaving behind a red sun that fell towards the east. In the next moment, the red sun rose up in the west, and the desolate land recovered its lush greenery. The warm wind swept over a set of withered bones. The ants surged over in a black swarm, piecing together a corpse from the remains. The wolves returned pieces of flesh and blood. Immediately, an elk came back to life, bending its knees and standing up. Time flew faster and faster, stealing away everything and returning everything, all the way to the origin of everything. The clear sky, the boundless land, the galloping beasts, all twisted and contracted towards a single point, merging into one in the end. Suddenly leaping out of this point, he saw a half-human, half-dragon man withdrawing that fatal bolt of lightning. The man overlooked everything, saw everything, grasped everything like the heavens themselves. However, the sky also shattered from his fury, causing the seas to flow and the mountains to collapse. The dragon swam around him, and behind him, 1,000 dragons soared into the sky. The phoenix unfurled its glorious wings and shrouded most of the sky, proudly ignoring the man's threat. The resplendent light made the dragons retreat. The scene froze in that moment. This was the origin of the Qilin's world. Li Qingshan was dumbfounded. The scene began to shatter from the edges, but from the perspective of the primordial Qilin, it did not look at the man who killed it, nor did it look at the dragon or the phoenix. There was only a woman at the center of the scene. She held her head high and her long hair danced in the wind. Her slender figure stretched upwards as much as she could, holding up the shattered sky with one hand. However, her lower body was like a snake wriggling between the mountains and seas. Goddess Nuwa. A sense of childlike admiration welled up within him. Li Qingshan's heart trembled as if he was gazing at his birth mother. He could not tell the difference between this life and his past. They were both gentle and loving, and tears suddenly welled up in his eyes. He wanted to stare at her face again, but the scene had already dimmed. Darkness enveloped him once more, and he returned to the empty divine hall thousands of years later, as if it had been a lifetime ago. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.